The moment I set foot in the old house, I knew it held secrets. Its walls, lined with decades-old wallpaper, seemed to whisper stories from the past. I had just moved in, eager to start anew after a tumultuous year. The house was a bargain, a little run-down, yes, but it had character. As I explored, my attention was drawn to the bedroom, particularly to the wallpaper. It was an ornate, floral pattern, faded with time, peeling slightly at the corners. I remember thinking it odd, how one room in this otherwise mundane house could evoke such a sense of unease. There was something about the way the dim light from the window caught the edges of the peeling wallpaper, casting long, slender shadows across the floor. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak and groan of its aging frame. It felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting. As the days passed, the room remained at the back of my mind, a small curiosity I intended to address once I had settled in. Little did I know, that room, with its peeling wallpaper, would soon consume my every waking thought. It was about to reveal to me a world beyond my wildest imaginings, a world where the line between reality and the impossible blurred into obscurity. It began one restless night, a couple of weeks after moving in. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with the usual concerns of life. That's when I noticed a small corner of wallpaper near the bed, curling away from the wall. On a whim, I reached out and gently tugged at it. The paper came away with surprising ease, revealing the wall beneath. What I saw made me sit up, my sleep-fogged brain struggling to comprehend. There, on the plaster, was a drawing. Not just any drawing, but a detailed sketch of a scene so specific it took my breath away. It depicted a small coffee shop, when I recognized instantly it was just a few blocks from my new home. The drawing was incredibly detailed. I could see the pattern of the tiles, the arrangement of the tables, even the expressions on the faces of the patrons. I dismissed it as a peculiar coincidence at first. Perhaps a previous owner had a fondness for the place. But the next day, as I walked past that very coffee shop, I froze. The scene before me was identical to the drawing, down to the smallest detail. The same people sat at the tables, in the same positions, wearing the same clothes. Even the barista's smile was captured perfectly in the sketch. My mind raced with questions. How could this be possible? Was it merely a bizarre coincidence, or was there something more to that old wallpaper? I returned home with a mix of fear and curiosity churning in my gut. That night, I peeled back more wallpaper, revealing another drawing. This one was of a street I hadn't visited yet, showing an upcoming festival, flags, stalls, and a parade. The realism was uncanny. The next day, I saw a flyer advertising the exact festival depicted in the drawing, scheduled for the following week. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the truth. The wallpaper wasn't just showing random scenes. It was showing the future. My initial fear gave way to an obsessive fascination. Each night, I peeled back more of the wall. Others were more significant, like a car accident on the corner of my street, or a sudden storm causing a blackout. With each revealed scene, my obsession grew. I started to document the drawings, comparing them to the real-life events they predicted. The accuracy was uncanny, every detail meticulously captured. My skepticism was replaced by a deep, unsettling paranoia. Was I merely observing these events, or was I somehow influencing them? The situation escalated when I uncovered a drawing that hit too close to home. It was a sketch of my friend Michael, whom I had known since college. In the drawing, he was in what appeared to be a heated argument with a stranger, in a place I didn't recognize. The expression on Michael's face was one of fear and anger, a sight I had never seen in real life. Determined to prevent this event, I warned Michael about the drawing. He was skeptical at first but agreed to be cautious. Days passed without incident, and I began to hope that maybe I had altered the course of the future. Then, one evening, Michael called me, his voice trembling. He had gotten into a confrontation with someone at a bar, the exact scene from the drawing. He was safe, but shaken. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The drawings were not mere predictions, they were inevitabilities. And now, my friend was involved in this twisted fate dictated by my bedroom wallpaper. The incident with Michael marked a turning point. My initial fascination with the wallpaper transformed into a desperate need to understand its origins and, if possible, to break its ominous hold over the future. Michael, equally disturbed by the experience, insisted on helping me unravel the mystery. We dedicated ourselves to peeling off every last strip of wallpaper, revealing the drawings beneath. As we worked, we uncovered sketches depicting events further into the future, each more disturbing than the last. It felt like we were peeling back layers of time itself, exposing the raw, unfiltered course of fate. Then, one evening, we uncovered a drawing that stopped us cold. It was a scene of chaos and destruction, a catastrophic event unlike anything we had seen in the previous sketches. In the center of the turmoil was a figure I recognized instantly. It was me, standing amidst the wreckage, a look of horror etched on my face. The sight of it sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just another random event, this was personal. It was a warning, or perhaps a predestined moment that I was hurtling towards, unable to stop. Fueled by a mix of fear and defiance, Michael and I set out to change this foretold disaster. We tried to piece together the location and possible causes of the event, hoping to avert it. But as the days ticked by, the sense of impending doom only grew stronger. We became entangled in a web of paranoia. Every decision and action weighed against the potential to bring about the catastrophe. The more we tried to evade the future, the more ensnared we became in its grip. The once mundane rhythms of daily life were now overshadowed by the looming threat of the unknown disaster, a shadow cast by the ominous drawing on my bedroom wall. In our quest to understand the ominous drawing, Michael and I began delving into the history of the house and its previous occupants. Our investigation led us to the local library, where we scoured old newspapers and public records. We learned about a reclusive artist who had lived in the house many years ago. Rumors suggested he was obsessed with the occult and had the peculiar habit of documenting his visions of the future. Armed with this knowledge, the pieces began to fall into place. The drawings were more than just art, they were the manifestations of the artist's visions, imbued with an uncanny power to predict the future. Realizing the magnitude of what we were dealing with, Michael and I felt a heavy weight of responsibility. It wasn't just about avoiding my ominous fate anymore, it was about understanding the limits of our ability to alter the future. We returned to the house, determined to uncover the final pieces of the wallpaper and reveal the last of the drawings. As we peeled away the remaining layers, we exposed the most chilling scene yet. It was a detailed depiction of the same catastrophic event, but with a new element of figure standing beside me, unmistakable in his features. It was Michael. The revelation hit us with the force of a tidal wave. Our efforts to change the future had entwined our fates. The drawing suggested that Michael's involvement would somehow be pivotal in the upcoming disaster. With this newfound knowledge, we were faced with a dire choice: continue our attempts to change the future, potentially exacerbating the situation, or accept the seemingly inevitable and prepare for the worst. The days that followed were filled with a tense, eerie calm. We both knew that the clock was ticking towards the moment depicted in the drawing. Despite our fears, we resolved to face whatever came together, hoping against hope that our friendship and determination could somehow rewrite the destiny that the wallpaper had laid out for us. As the fateful day approached, the tension between Michael and me was palpable. We had done everything in our power to prevent the catastrophe, yet a sense of inevitability hung over us like a dark cloud. The world around us seemed to carry on as usual, oblivious to the impending disaster that only we knew was coming. Then, it happened. The day unfolded just as it had in the drawing, despite our best efforts. The location was a busy downtown street, bustling with people. I recognized the scene instantly from the wallpaper: the same buildings, the same cars, even the same street vendor on the corner. As the events began to align with the drawing, a sense of surreal dread overtook me. Michael and I were at the epicenter, just as depicted. But then, something unexpected occurred. In the midst of the chaos, as the catastrophic event began to unfold, Michael and I found ourselves not as victims, but as inadvertent heroes. Our foreknowledge of the event, combined with our determination to change the course of fate, allowed us to act in ways that prevented the worst from happening. We managed to avert the disaster, saving lives in the process. The sense of relief and disbelief was overwhelming. In the aftermath, as emergency services swarmed the area and the crowd began to dissipate, Michael and I shared a moment of quiet understanding. We had faced our destiny and emerged not only unscathed, but having made a difference. The wallpaper's final prediction had come true, but not in the way we had feared. We had broken the cycle, proving that the future was not set in stone. As we walked away from the scene, a mix of exhaustion and triumph in our steps, I realized that the true power of the wallpaper lay not in its ability to predict the future, but in the choices we made in response to those predictions. The story of the wallpaper and its eerie prophecies remained with us, a shared experience that bonded us in ways we could never have imagined. And though the wallpaper was gone, its legacy lingered, a reminder of the mysterious, unseen forces that can shape our lives in the most unexpected ways. The world, as I knew it, was a small, picturesque town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. It was a kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and secrets were hard to keep. I was Luna, a 17-year-old who, for as long as I could remember, had been the heartbeat of this tight-knit community. My life was an open book, one without any remarkable twists until that fateful afternoon. Jamie, my best friend since kindergarten, burst into my room with an excitement that was both infectious and alarming. Her eyes sparkled with a strange mixture of confusion and thrill as she blurted out, "Luna, I met your twin today in town." I stared at her, my brain refusing to process her words. "What are you talking about, Jamie?" "I'm an only child," I replied, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. The idea was ludicrous. In a town as small as ours, a secret like a twin would be impossible to keep. But Jamie was insistent. "I'm serious, Luna. She looked exactly like you, down to the freckle on your left cheek. She even had the same scar on her wrist from when we fell off our bikes in 3rd grade. Her description sent a shiver down my spine. It was impossible. Yet the earnestness in her eyes told me she wasn't joking. "This has to be a mistake," I muttered, more to myself than to her. Despite my disbelief, curiosity gnawed at me. The thought of someone masquerading as me was unsettling, but I needed to see for myself. "Let's find this twin then," I said, masking my anxiety with a forced smile. Jamie's eyes lit up, and we planned to scour the town the next day. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind raced with wild theories and explanations, none of which made any sense. The idea of having a twin was absurd, yet the unease gnawing at me wouldn't subside. I tossed and turned, the moonlight casting eerie shadows across my room, making the familiar seem foreign. In the silence of the night, my room felt different. I glanced around, noticing subtle changes. A picture frame on my dresser was facing the wrong way, and my favorite book was no longer on my nightstand. I sat up, heart pounding, as I stared at these minor yet jarring alterations. Was I losing my mind? The next morning, Jamie and I set out, our mission clear yet unfathomable. We walked through the streets, scanning every face we passed. The town, usually a comforting presence, felt alien, as if it were hiding secrets in its very foundations. Hours passed with no sign of my supposed twin. Disappointment and relief battled within me, but Jamie's determination didn't wane. She was convinced the twin was real, and her conviction unsettled me further. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, we headed home, our search yielding nothing but tired feet and unanswered questions. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I know you're looking for me," it read. A chill ran down my spine. The message felt like a taunt, a shadow looming over my reality. Who was this person, and how did they know about our search? I wanted to believe it was a prank, but the fear gripping my heart told me otherwise. Jamie was asleep, oblivious to the late-night message that threatened to unravel my world. I lay there, staring at the screen, the words burning into my memory. A twin, a doppelganger, or something far more sinister I didn't know. But as the night deepened, so did the mystery that now enveloped my life. The next day, I awoke to a world that seemed subtly altered, as though it had shifted on its axis ever so slightly while I slept. The text from the unknown number lingered in my mind, casting a shadow over my thoughts. As I sat at the breakfast table, I observed my parents. They seemed normal, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that they were holding back something, a secret so deeply buried that it had become a part of our family's foundation. After breakfast, I approached them hesitantly. "Mom, Dad, have you ever, could I possibly have a twin?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. They exchanged a glance that spoke volumes before my mother replied with a too quick, "Of course not, honey. You know you're our only child." Their words should have reassured me, but the fleeting look they shared only fueled my doubts. It was clear they were hiding something, but I couldn't fathom what it could be. Amy arrived shortly after, her enthusiasm undimmed by our fruitless search the previous day. "We'll find her today, Lena. I can feel it," she said with a conviction that both comforted and worried me. As we set out, the town felt even more alien than the day before. Every glance in my direction seemed suspicious, every whisper a potential clue. Our search took us to the local library, the park, and even the old abandoned house at the edge of town. The latter was a place of local legend, said to be haunted. As we approached it, a sense of dread filled me. The house, with its peeling paint and overgrown garden, seemed to watch us, its windows like dark unblinking eyes. "Let's look inside," Jamie suggested, her voice a mix of fear and excitement. I hesitated but followed her in. The air inside was stale, heavy with the weight of untold stories. As we moved through the rooms, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My skin crawled, and every creak of the floorboard sounded like a whisper from the shadows. We found nothing, and as we left, I couldn't help but feel relieved. The house was a place of forgotten memories, better left alone. As we walked back through the town, Jamie talked animatedly about other places we could search, but I barely heard her. My mind was elsewhere, lost in the maze of my own troubled thoughts. That evening, as I lay in bed, another message arrived from the I showed the messages to Jamie the next day. She read them, her brow furrowed in concern. "This is getting serious, Lena. Maybe we should involve the police," she suggested. But I shook my head. The police wouldn't understand. This was something beyond their realm of logic. Days turned into weeks, and the search for my twin became an obsession. Items in my room continued to move, and the messages became more frequent, each one more cryptic than the last. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, each day blurring into the next in a haze of confusion and fear. Jamie, once my constant companion, began to drift away. Her belief in the twins' existence consumed her, and our friendship strained under the weight of the unexplainable. I missed her, but part of me was relieved. I couldn't drag her further into this nightmare. As I lay in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, a realization hit me with the force of a thunderclap. The twin wasn't just a figment of my imagination or a doppelganger roaming the streets. She was something more, something deeply connected to me. A part of me that I had yet to understand, a shadow self that had been with me all along, lurking just beneath the surface of my consciousness. I knew then that I had to confront this entity, this phantom twin of mine. It was the only way to untangle the web of fear and confusion that had enveloped my life. With a resolve that surprised even me, I got out of bed and prepared to face whatever truth lay hidden in the darkness. The days following my realization were a blur of anticipation and dread. I felt like a detective inching closer to the heart of a mystery that was as personal as it was perplexing. The cryptic messages continued, each one a breadcrumb leading me down a path I wasn't sure I wanted to tread. But I knew I had no choice. I had to face whatever this was. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows over the town, I decided to visit the old house again. There was something about that place, a sense of unresolved history that called to me. Jamie, caught up in her own theories and investigations, didn't join me. I was alone, but perhaps that was for the best. The house loomed before me, its windows like hollow eyes. The air was thick with the scent of decay and neglect. As I stepped inside, the floorboards groaned under my weight, echoing through the empty rooms. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that penetrated the gloom. I wandered through the house, each room telling a story of a life long abandoned. In what must have been the living room, I found an old mirror. The surface was tarnished, the silver backing peeling away in places. As I gazed into it, I half expected to see someone else's reflection staring back at me. Instead, I saw myself. But there was something off. My reflection seemed to flicker, like an image on an old television screen. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and touched the cold glass. At that moment, I felt a connection, a thread stretching back through the years to a past I had long forgotten. The air around me grew colder, and the room seemed to darken. I looked into the mirror again, and this time, I wasn't alone. Standing beside my reflection was another girl, identical to me in every way. My heart raced as I turned to look beside me, but there was no one there. When I looked back at the mirror, the girl was still there, smiling at me with a knowing look. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'm what you've forgotten," the girl in the mirror replied, her voice a haunting echo of my own. "I'm the part of you that you locked away." Tears filled my eyes as memories flooded back. Memories of laughter and tears, of love and loss. Memories of a twin sister who had been my other half, who had died tragically young. We were inseparable, two halves of a whole, until the day she was taken from me. "I thought I lost you," I sobbed, my hands still pressed against the mirror. "You did. And in your grief, you chose to forget me. But I've always been here, watching over you, influencing your life from the shadows," she said, her eyes filled with an ancient sadness. "But why? Why reveal yourself now?" I asked, struggling to make sense of it all. "Because it's time for you to remember. To confront the past and accept it," she replied, her image starting to fade. As her form dissipated, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, no longer buried in the depths of my subconscious. My twin, my other half, was gone, but she had never truly left me. I left the house feeling lighter, yet profoundly changed. The mystery of the phantom twin had been solved, but in its place was a new understanding of myself and the depths of my own mind. The days that followed were a journey of self-discovery and healing. I talked to my parents, who tearfully admitted to hiding the truth about my twin's death, thinking it would protect me from the pain. They were wrong, but I forgave them. We grieved together, finally acknowledging the loss that had silently shaped our lives. Jamie, seeing the change in me, reached out. We mended our friendship, stronger now for having weathered this storm. She listened as I told her the truth, her eyes wide with wonder and empathy. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the experience had left its mark on me. I no longer feared the shadows or the secrets they held. I had faced my darkest memories and come out the other side. As I lay in bed one night, my phone buzzed with a message. I opened it, expecting the usual chatter from friends. Instead, it was another message from the unknown number, but this time it was different. "You found the truth, but remember, I'm always with you," it read. A smile tugged at the corners of my lips. The message was a reminder, not a threat. My twin, in whatever form she existed now, was still a part of me. I drifted off to sleep, comforted by the knowledge that though she was gone, her spirit lived on in me. The night after receiving that final message, my dreams were a cascade of memories, both joyous and sorrowful. In the dreamscape, I relived moments with my twin, our secret games, shared laughter, and the unspoken bond that only twins understand. I woke up with a sense of peace, feeling her presence like a soft echo in my heart. The days that followed were a mix of reflection and newfound understanding. I immersed myself in old family albums, tracing the contours of a past that now felt complete. My twin's face, once a forgotten shadow, now brought a bittersweet comfort. However, as the initial shock and grief subsided, I found myself grappling with a surreal reality. My twin, a part of me yet a distinct entity, existed in a realm beyond my full comprehension. The messages, the altered items in my room, the mirror encounter, they all pointed to a presence that defied logic. It was as if she lived in the liminal spaces of my existence, a whisper just beyond the veil of the physical world. Jamie, ever the believer in the unexplainable, became a pillar of support. We spent hours discussing the possibilities. Could it be a haunting, a psychic connection, or something else entirely? Our conversations veered between theories and memories, each of us finding solace in the others. As autumn's chill crept into the town, bringing with it the rustle of falling leaves and the smell of wood smoke, I felt a shift within myself. The fear and confusion that had once clouded my mind now gave way to a profound curiosity. My twin, or her essence, had chosen to reveal herself, to communicate with me. But why? And why now? I decided to return to the old house, the place where the veil between us had thinned. The house, once a symbol of fear, now held a different meaning. It was a bridge between two worlds, a place where I could feel closer to her. As I walked through its decaying halls, I spoke to her. I didn't expect an answer, but speaking out loud gave my thoughts clarity. "I know you're here," I said, my voice steady. "I feel you. I don't fully understand why or how, but I accept it." The house remained silent, but the air around me seemed to hum with energy. In that moment, I knew she was listening, a silent observer in my journey of self-discovery. The weeks passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Then, one evening as I sat in my room, a feeling of unease crept over me. It was a familiar sensation, one I had come to associate with her. I looked around, half expecting to see something out of place, a sign of her presence. But everything was as I had left it. I lay down, closing my eyes, focusing on the stillness. And then I heard it, a faint whisper, like the rustle of leaves. It was her voice, a soft murmur in my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was comforting, like a lullaby. I opened my eyes, half expecting to see her, but the room was empty. The whisper faded, leaving behind a lingering warmth. It was a moment of connection, a reminder that though she was not physically with me, our bond was unbroken. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my lips, the whisper echoing in my dreams. The experience solidified my belief that she was still with me, in some form, watching over me as a guardian angel might. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The mysterious occurrences became less frequent, but each one was a reminder of the extraordinary journey I had embarked upon. I shared my experiences with Jamie, who listened with wide-eyed fascination. We speculated and pondered, but some questions remained unanswered. As the anniversary of my twin's death approached, I felt a mixture of emotions: grief for the sister I had lost, gratitude for the connection we still shared, and a deep sense of wonder at the mysteries of life and death. I planned to spend the day at the old house, the place where the veil between us seemed thinnest. I arrived at the house on a crisp, clear morning, the air tinged with the promise of winter. The house, with its peeling paint and overgrown garden, stood as a testament to the passage of time. I stepped inside, feeling the familiar sense of connection. I wandered through the rooms, each step a tribute to her memory. I talked to her, sharing my thoughts and feelings, my hopes and fears. The house seemed to listen, its silence a comforting embrace. As I spoke, I felt the connection between us strengthen, a bridge spanning the divide of life and death. In that moment, I realized that our bond was more than just memories or a shared past. It was an unbreakable link, woven into the very fabric of my being. In the quiet of the house, memories flowed through me like a river. I remembered our childhood games, our secret language, the way she would laugh with her whole body. I could almost hear her laughter echoing through the empty rooms, a ghostly melody that warmed my heart. I found myself in the room with the old mirror, the place where I had first truly seen her. The mirror was as I remembered, its surface tarnished with age. I gazed into it, half expecting to see her beside me again. But this time, I saw only my own reflection. I touched the cold glass, tracing the outline of my face. "I miss you," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "But I know you're still with me, in some way." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew that while I couldn't see her, she was there, a part of me as much as my own heart. Her death had been a tragedy, but in its wake, it had left a connection that transcended the physical world. Leaving the house, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had come to honor her memory, but in doing so, I had found a deeper understanding of our bond. She was gone, but she lived on in me, her spirit a guiding light in the darkness. The days that followed were a testament to the strength of that bond. I found myself more attuned to the subtle signs of her presence, a sudden drop in temperature, a faint scent of her favorite perfume, a feeling of being watched over and protected. I shared my experiences with Jamie, who listened with a mix of awe and envy. "You're lucky, in a way," she said one day. "You have a guardian angel who's also your twin. That's pretty amazing." Her words made me smile. Yes, it was amazing, and while it was a connection born of tragedy, it was also a source of strength and comfort. As time passed, the occurrences became less frequent, but each one was a reminder of the invisible thread that connected us. My twin was with me, in the whisper of the wind, in the flicker of a shadow, in the quiet moments of reflection. I often returned to the old house, our sanctuary, where the veil between us was thinnest. It was there that I felt closest to her, a place where I could talk to her, laugh with her, and remember her. Life went on, with its joys and sorrows, its triumphs and challenges. But through it all, I carried a piece of her with me, a silent companion on my journey. As the years passed, the memory of my twin became a part of the town's folklore, a story whispered among the youth. But for me, it was much more than a story. It was a reality, a connection that defied explanation. I grew older, but the bond between us remained, a constant in an ever-changing world. In moments of doubt or fear, I would feel her presence, a reassuring touch on my shoulder, a gentle whisper in my ear. And so, my life continued, a journey marked by an unseen bond, a connection that transcended the boundaries of life and death. My twin was gone, but she was also always with me, a part of my past, my present, and my future. As I sit here, writing this, I know that she is with me, watching over me, her spirit intertwined with mine. And in that knowledge, I find an unending source of comfort and love. The story of my twin, my phantom sister, is one of loss and discovery, of grief and acceptance. It is a reminder that love is a force that transcends even death, a bond that cannot be broken by the past. And as I look to the future, I carry her with me, a guiding light in the darkness, a whisper in the silence, a presence in the emptiness. She is gone, but she is also here, forever a part of me. The day I moved into the old house nestled in the countryside, I couldn't have predicted the strange turn my summer break would take. I'm a college student majoring in English, and I had sought this place out for seclusion and tranquility. I needed a break from the incessant bustle of campus life, a place where I could focus on my writing and recharge my overworked mind. The house, an aging yet charming structure, was surrounded by a dense forest, creating a sense of isolation from the outside world. It was exactly what I had been looking for. As I unpacked my belongings, the rustic feel of the wooden floors and the faint scent of pine in the air made me feel at home. I spent the rest of the day settling in, exploring the creaky rooms filled with quaint old-fashioned furniture. By evening, I felt a sense of accomplishment and looked forward to a peaceful night's sleep in my new retreat. But peace was the last thing I found that night. I remember waking up, startled, to a sound so unexpected in such a remote place. The unmistakable rumble and whistle of a train. I lay in bed, my heart pounding, as the sound grew louder, seemingly passing right by my house. The walls vibrated with the force of it, and for a moment, I felt as though I was right beside the tracks. But that was the thing, there were no tracks nearby. No railway stations, no signs of any train routes in the area. I had checked the maps meticulously before choosing this place. Confused and still half asleep, I peered out the window into the darkness, but there was nothing to see, just the still, quiet woods. The sound eventually faded, leaving behind a heavy silence. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, a product of my tired mind, but the realism of it gnawed at me. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering about the source of those phantom train sounds. Little did I know, that night was just the beginning of a summer that would challenge everything I believed about reality. The next morning, I woke up feeling unrested, the sound of the train still echoing in my mind. I tried to shake off the eerie feeling as I made coffee, telling myself it was just a figment of my imagination, a vivid dream, nothing more. But the rational explanations did little to ease my unease. Determined to find some logical answer, I decided to ask the neighbors. The nearest house was a good half-mile walk through the woods. The path was overgrown, indicating few ventured this way. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly lady who lived there, greeted me with a mix of curiosity and wariness. When I mentioned the train, her expression changed subtly, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Discomfort? "Oh, you must have been dreaming, dear," she said with a forced smile. "There haven't been trains around here for decades. The old tracks were removed long before you were born." Her words should have been reassuring, but they weren't. Instead, they deepened the mystery. If there were no tracks, then what had I heard last night? That evening, as I tried to focus on writing, the anticipation gnawed at me. Would I hear the train again? Part of me hoped I wouldn't, that it had indeed been a one-off occurrence. Yet, another part, perhaps the writer in me, was intrigued, almost hopeful for a repeat. And sure enough, as the clock struck midnight, the sound returned. The distant whistle, the rumbling that grew steadily louder, as if a train were barreling towards the house. This time, I rushed to the window, peering out into the night. There was nothing but the pale glow of the moon over the silent woods. The sound lasted longer this time, and I could swear I heard something else, faint voices, a distant melody, like music from another era. It was mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. When the sound finally faded, I was left in a daze, my heart racing, my mind reeling with questions. What was happening here? Was I losing my grip on reality, or was there something more to this house, this secluded spot in the woods? One thing was clear, I couldn't ignore this. I had to find out the truth behind these phantom rails. The following days turned into a blur of obsession and fear. Each night, the train returned, its ghostly whistle piercing the silence of the countryside. With every passing, the sounds seemed to grow more vivid, more tangible. The voices and music I'd heard were no longer faint, they were clear, haunting echoes of a bygone era. I began to research the history of the area, spending hours at the local library, poring over old maps and newspaper archives. I learned that a railway line once ran through these woods, part of a network that connected remote villages. But it had been decommissioned and dismantled in the early 20th century, long forgotten by the world. This discovery only deepened the mystery. How could a non-existent train be haunting my nights? My dreams, too, became haunted. Night after night, I found myself aboard the phantom train, moving through a landscape that was both familiar and alien. The passengers around me were faceless, their features blurred, yet they spoke in hushed tones, as if sharing secrets I couldn't quite hear. Each dream ended the same way, with a sense of impending doom, a feeling that something terrible was about to happen. One afternoon, in a small dusty coffee shop in town, I met Mrs. Harrow, an elderly woman known for her knowledge of local history. Her eyes widened when I mentioned the train. After a moment of hesitation, she shared a story that chilled me to the bone. Many years ago, she began, there was a terrible accident. A train, much like the one I described, had derailed in the woods near my house. It was a tragedy that had claimed many lives, a story that had been buried and forgotten by the town, a painful memory that people chose to ignore. As I listened to her, a chilling realization washed over me. The dreams, the sounds, the eerie presence, they weren't just figments of my imagination. They were echoes of a tragic past, reaching out from the depths of time. That night, as the train's whistle once again shattered the stillness, I felt a different emotion stirring within me. Not just fear, but a sense of purpose. I needed to uncover the full story of the accident, to understand why these restless spirits were reaching out to me. I sensed that they were trapped, bound to the site of their tragedy, and perhaps, in some way, I could help them find peace. As the days turned to weeks, my life became consumed by the mystery of the phantom train. The nightly visits continued, each one more intense and unsettling than the last. The sounds of the train, the ghostly whispers, the ethereal music, they all seemed to beckon me, urging me to look deeper, to uncover the truth that lay buried in the woods. I had gathered every piece of information I could find about the train accident. It had occurred on a foggy night, much like the ones I had experienced. The train, filled with passengers, had inexplicably veered off the tracks, crashing into the dense forest. The official reports were scarce, and it seemed as though the incident had been hastily covered up, relegated to a forgotten chapter in the town's history. But the spirits of those lost souls refused to be forgotten. Each night, as the train's whistle cut through the silence, I felt their presence more acutely. Their whispers grew louder, their pleas more desperate. It was as if they were calling me, guiding me towards something. Then, one fateful night, I decided to confront the mystery head-on. I stayed awake, my eyes fixed on the clock, waiting for midnight to strike. As the familiar sounds of the train began, something within me shifted. I was no longer a passive observer, I was part of this spectral world. I felt an overwhelming urge to follow the sound, to trace the path of the ghostly train. As if in a trance, I left my house and ventured into the woods. The night was eerily calm, the moon casting long shadows between the trees. The sound of the train grew louder, its whistle more insistent, guiding me deeper into the forest. Then, suddenly, the world around me changed. The trees seemed to blur into motion, and for a moment, I saw the phantom train, a spectral locomotive barreling through the night. Its carriages were filled with ghostly figures, their faces lost in the shadows, their eyes reflecting a profound sadness. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as the train passed before me. It was a hauntingly beautiful yet terrifying sight, a glimpse into a world that existed between the living and the dead. As the last carriage disappeared into the darkness, I found myself alone again in the silent woods. But something had changed. I now knew that the spirits of the train were real, trapped in an endless loop of their final journey. And I knew that I had to help them find peace, to break the cycle of their eternal suffering. In the days that followed my surreal encounter with the phantom train, I was driven by a newfound resolve. I knew that I couldn't ignore the spirits' plight. They were reaching out to me, and I felt a deep responsibility to help them find peace. The experience in the woods had been more than just a haunting vision, it had been a call to action. I delved deeper into the town's history, seeking out every scrap of information about the train accident. The more I learned, the more it became clear that the tragedy had been hastily brushed under the rug by the townsfolk, eager to move on from the dark event. But the spirits of those lost in the accident refused to be forgotten, their presence a constant reminder of the past that haunted the present. As I pieced together the story of that fateful night, I came across old photographs of the victims. Staring into the faces of those who had perished, I felt a deep sense of sorrow and empathy. They were not just faceless ghosts, they were individuals with lives and stories, cut tragically short. I realized that what these spirits needed was recognition, an acknowledgement of their existence and their untimely demise. I decided to organize a memorial in their honor, a chance for the town to come together, and finally confront the tragedy that had been ignored for so long. The idea was met with resistance at first. Many in the town were reluctant to dredge up such a painful part of their history. But I persisted, sharing the experiences I had since moving into the old house, the nightly visits from the train, and my encounter in the woods. Gradually, people began to listen, and a sense of collective responsibility started to take hold. The night of the memorial arrived. A small group of us gathered in the clearing where the old railway line had once run. We lit candles and laid flowers, creating a makeshift shrine to the lost souls. I read out the names of the victims, each one echoing in the still night air. As we stood there in a solemn circle, something miraculous happened. The air around us grew colder, and a gentle wind began to rustle the leaves. Then, faintly at first, we heard the distant sound of a train whistle. But this time, it was different. It wasn't the ominous, haunting sound I had come to know. It was softer, almost melodic, like a farewell song. The spirits of the train were with us, I could feel it. They were no longer trapped in their endless cycle of suffering. The recognition of their tragedy, the acknowledgement of their existence, had given them the peace they had been seeking for so long. As the sound of the train faded into the night, a profound sense of peace settled over the clearing. The spirits were finally at rest, and in their departure, they had left behind a sense of closure, not just for themselves but for the town as well. That night marked the end of the phantom train's visits. The house, once a nexus of spectral activity, became just a house again, quiet and serene. I continued to live there for the rest of the summer, writing and reflecting on the incredible journey I had been a part of. As I prepared to leave at the end of the season, I looked back at the house with a sense of gratitude. It had been more than just a place to stay, it had been a gateway to understanding, a bridge between the past and the present. The spirits of the train had found peace, and in helping them, I had found a deeper sense of purpose and connection to the world around me. As the summer drew to a close, the quiet of the countryside seemed to envelop the old house with a new sense of tranquility. The nightly echoes of the phantom train had ceased, and in their absence, a peaceful stillness reigned. I spent my last days in the house reflecting on the extraordinary events of the past weeks. The experience had changed me, leaving an indelible mark on my soul. I realized that my summer had been about more than just escape and solitude. It had been a journey into the heart of a mystery, a confrontation with the past, and a lesson in the power of acknowledgement and memory. The spirits of the train, once trapped in their perpetual sorrow, were now free, and in their liberation, I found a deeper understanding of life's impermanence, and the importance of remembering those who have gone before us. On my final day, I took one last walk through the woods, following the overgrown path where the old railway once lay. The air was filled with the sounds of nature, a stark contrast to the ghostly whistles and rumblings that had once filled the night. I felt a sense of closure, a feeling that the story of the phantom train was complete. As I packed my car, ready to return to the bustle of college life, I looked back at the house. It no longer seemed like just an old rustic building. It was a place where the past and present had intersected, where a forgotten tragedy had been brought to light, and where restless spirits had found peace. Driving away, I carried with me not only my belongings, but also the memories and lessons of that summer. The experience had given me a new perspective on life, death, and the echoes of history that linger in forgotten places. The story of the phantom train would stay with me, a reminder of the mysteries that exist just beyond the veil of the known world. As the house disappeared from view, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had started as a quest for solitude had become an adventure into the unknown, a testament to the enduring power of memory, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us to the past. The spirits of the train were at peace, and so was I, ready to face the future with a renewed sense of wonder and respect for the mysteries that surround us. I've always had an affinity for the abandoned and the forgotten. I run a blog called Echoes of the Forgotten that chronicles my journeys through derelict buildings, deserted towns, and all manner of places reclaimed by time. My latest venture, however, was unlike any before. This is the story of my descent into the depths of the Hollow Line, an abandoned subway station in the heart of a sprawling, modern city. The Hollow Line wasn't just another dot on the map of the city's vast subway system. Its story was woven with threads of mystery and darkness. Closed off in the late 1960s, this station became an urban legend, whispered about in hushed tones by those who dared to remember. Rumors of strange disappearances and eerie occurrences clung to it like a chilling mist. I stumbled upon the legend of the Hollow Line through a comment left on my blog. An anonymous reader urged me to explore the station, hinting at untold secrets hidden in its depths. As someone who thrived on unveiling the forgotten, this was a siren call I couldn't resist. It was an irresistible opportunity for a thrilling exploration and, potentially, a gripping blog post. My friends and a few locals I chatted with while gathering information about the station warned me against it. Some places are forgotten for a reason, they'd say with a serious tone that sent shivers down my spine. But the allure of the unknown was too powerful. I was determined to uncover the truth behind the Hollow Line, to document its secrets and bring them into the light. So, on a chilly autumn evening, I packed my bag with essentials, a flashlight, camera, notebook, and a few tools to help me navigate any obstacles. I had done my research, pored over old maps, and found an inconspicuous entry point that would lead me into the heart of the station. As I approached the old entrance, a sense of unease settled over me. The city's noises faded into a distant hum, and the only sound that accompanied me was the crunch of fallen leaves under my boots. The entrance was concealed behind overgrown foliage and years of neglect, a forgotten relic hidden in plain sight. With a deep breath to steady my nerves, I pushed aside the rusted gate and stepped into the darkness of the Hollow Line. The beam of my flashlight cut through the pitch black, revealing a world untouched by time. Layers of dust coated everything, and the silence was so profound it felt almost tangible. I had ventured into many abandoned places before, but this was different. The Hollow Line wasn't just a physical space, it felt like a living, breathing entity. It was as if the very walls were imbued with the memories of those who had once traversed its platforms. As I moved deeper into the station, the air grew colder, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the echo of my footsteps. The walls were adorned with faded posters, a frozen snapshot of a bygone era. The tracks lay dormant, with the rusted train sitting solemnly on them, like a slumbering beast. I could feel the weight of the station's history pressing in on me, a history that I was determined to uncover. Little did I know, I was about to step into a nightmare that would forever change the way I looked at the forgotten corners of the world. The deeper I ventured into the hollow line, the more I felt detached from the world outside. My flashlight's beam seemed to struggle against the darkness, as if the shadows themselves were a tangible force. It was in these moments, surrounded by the remnants of a forgotten past, that I found the thrill of exploration most intoxicating. I was about to take a turn into a narrower corridor when my phone vibrated in my pocket, breaking the haunting silence. An anonymous message appeared on the screen, its words sending a chill down my spine. "Beware the whispers of the lost, for they yearn for company." The message vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving no trace it was ever there. Puzzled and slightly unnerved, I pocketed my phone. The rational part of my brain suggested it was just a prank, perhaps by someone who knew of my plans. But a deeper, more primal part of me couldn't shake off the sense of foreboding that the message instilled. Pressing on, I found my surroundings changing. The once pristine and modern architecture gave way to older, more decrepit features. It was as if I was walking backwards through time, witnessing the layers of the city's history unfold with each step. It was then I stumbled upon something truly peculiar, a collection of old, yellowed newspapers scattered across a bench. The headline spoke of unexplained disappearances linked to the hollow line, dating back to its closure. The articles were vague, filled with speculation and unease, but no concrete answers. This piqued my curiosity further. What had really happened here? The station's eerie silence was now punctuated by distant, unidentifiable sounds that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth. Each creak and groan of the structure made my heart race, a mix of fear and excitement. As I delved deeper, the graffiti on the walls grew more frequent and more unsettling. Phrases like "they never left" and "the hollow line remembers" were scrawled in frantic, shaky hands. It was a stark reminder that this place wasn't just a relic, but a tomb of untold stories. My determination to uncover the truth about the hollow line was now coupled with a sense of urgency. The station was more than an abandoned structure, it was a keeper of secrets, and I felt compelled to bring those secrets to light. Despite my growing trepidation, I continued onward. Each step took me further from the world I knew and deeper into a realm of shadows and whispers. I was no longer just an urban explorer, I had become a seeker of truths, braving the unknown that lurked in the heart of the hollow line. The air grew colder and denser as I ventured further into the belly of the hollow line. My flashlight seemed to struggle against the overwhelming darkness, casting long, eerie shadows that danced on the crumbling walls. The sense of isolation was palpable, the world above felt like a distant memory. Before embarking on this journey, I had spent nights poring over old maps and records, trying to piece together the station's layout and history. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality of being here. The maps were a mere skeleton, the station, in its decaying grandeur, was the flesh and blood. The initial part of the station, though abandoned, retained a semblance of the mundane. But as I delved deeper, reality seemed to warp. The architecture became an amalgamation of different eras, each turn revealing a new, decayed facet of its history. It started with sounds, soft, almost imperceptible whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls. I would stop, hold my breath, but the moment I resumed walking, so would the whispers. Shadows seemed to flicker in my peripheral vision, always just out of sight, retreating when I turned to look. In the depths of the station, I found a narrow, hidden passageway. It was not on any of the maps I had studied. Overcome with curiosity, I squeezed through the gap. The passage led to an older part of the station, long forgotten and shrouded in darkness. This hidden section was a twisted maze, its walls lined with archaic symbols that made my skin crawl. The whispers grew louder, morphing into anguished moans and stifled sobs. The air was thick with the scent of damp and decay. I began to see things, figures in the shadows, fleeting glimpses of faces twisted in silent screams, hands reaching out from the darkness, only to vanish when I tried to focus on them. The deeper I went, the more the line between reality and nightmare blurred. I felt eyes on me from every direction, as if I was intruding into a realm that was never meant for the living. The station's secrets were close, I could feel it. But with each step, I was losing a part of myself to the hollow line's hunting embrace. My resolve to uncover the truth was now mixed with a primal fear. I was no longer just an explorer, but a witness to the remnants of lost souls, trapped in an eternal loop of despair and madness. The realization hit me hard. I was in a place that was as much alive as it was dead, a limbo for those who had vanished within its walls. The hollow line was not just a station, it was a purgatory, a place between worlds, and I was caught in its chilling grasp. The deeper I ventured into the hidden section of the hollow line, the more the oppressive atmosphere weighed upon me. The air was thick with a sense of dread that clung to my skin like cold sweat. The whispers had grown into an incessant chorus, echoing around me, words indiscernible yet full of sorrow and warning. I found myself in what appeared to be the central chamber of this hidden section. The room was vast, far larger than any other part of the subway station. Its walls were covered in intricate, grotesque murals depicting scenes of anguish and despair, a chilling testament to the horrors that had unfolded here. In the center of the chamber stood an altar-like structure, surrounded by an array of candles, long since extinguished. As I approached, the air grew colder, the whispers louder, and the shadows darker. It was here, in this unhallowed place, that I came face to face with the harrowing truth of the hollow line. The candles flickered to life, casting a ghostly glow across the chamber. Figures began to materialize around me, their forms ethereal and shifting. These were the lost souls of the hollow line, bound to this place by a sinister, otherworldly entity that lurked in the shadows. Their faces were twisted in eternal torment, eyes hollow with despair. They reached out to me, not with malice, but with a desperate plea for release. Amongst their whispers, I discerned a warning. Leave this cursed place, lest you join us in our eternal damnation. It was then that I felt a presence, ancient and malevolent, observing me from the darkness. The entity of the hollow line had awoken to my intrusion. A sense of overwhelming terror gripped me as I realized the gravity of my situation. I was in the heart of a nightmare, and the nightmare had turned its gaze upon me. The entity made itself known, a formless shadow that seemed to absorb the light around it. It moved with a chilling grace, its presence suffocating. The lost souls wailed in despair as it approached, their voices a cacophony of pain and fear. I knew then that I had to escape, to flee from this unholy place. The whispers of the lost souls turned into urgent cries, guiding me away from the entity. I ran, my breath ragged, my heart pounding in my chest. The entity's malevolent force pursued me, a relentless darkness that sought to claim me as one of its own. The once familiar corridors of the hollow line had become a labyrinth of terror, each turn a potential trap. The entity's presence loomed over me, a constant threat that drove me to the edge of madness. In my frantic escape, I glimpsed the realities of the hollow line, the souls it had claimed, the lives it had shattered. The station was not just a place of physical abandonment, but a realm of lost hopes and unending despair. As I neared the exit, the entity's power began to wane, its grip on me loosening. The voices of the lost souls grew fainter, their whispers a distant echo in the dark corridors. With one final burst of adrenaline-fueled desperation, I emerged from the depths of the hollow line, gasping for air and drenched in a cold sweat. The night sky greeted me, a stark contrast to the darkness I had escaped. I stood there, on the threshold of the forgotten station, a survivor of its horrors, forever changed by the secrets it held. The hollow line was a place where reality and nightmare intertwined, a warning of the dangers that lurk in the shadows of the forgotten. The world outside the hollow line felt surreal, as if I had stepped into a different reality. My legs trembled beneath me, my breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. I leaned against the wall, trying to comprehend the nightmare I had just escaped. The early morning air was crisp and biting, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness of the subway. As I made my way through the deserted streets, the harrowing events in the station replayed in my mind. The ghostly figures, the sinister entity, and the chorus of whispers echoed in my ears. I felt a lingering presence, as if the entity was still reaching out, trying to pull me back into the depths. I realized then that my escape was more than physical, it was a desperate fight for my sanity. The hollow line had revealed its true nature to me, a malevolent force that fed on despair and sorrow. It was not just a place, but a sentient being, a collector of lost souls. The whispers of the ghostly inhabitants of the hollow line had turned into a guiding chorus in those final moments of escape. Their voices, once filled with despair, had taken on a tone of urgency, pushing me towards the exit, towards safety. In their own way, they had saved me from the clutches of the entity. As the sun began to rise, casting its light over the city, the weight of my experience weighed heavily on me. The hollow line was no longer a subject for my blog, it was a grim reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. In the days that followed, I grappled with the decision of whether to share my experience. My blog had always been about exploring and uncovering the hidden, but the hollow line was different. It was a place that demanded respect and fear, a place that should remain untouched and forgotten. I chose silence, a decision that weighed heavily on me. The hollow line and its secrets would remain unspoken, a chapter in my life closed and sealed away. But the echoes of that night never truly left me. The whispers of the lost souls, the chilling presence of the entity, remained etched in my memory, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks in forgotten places. As I moved on with my life, the hollow line became a distant, haunting memory. But deep down, I knew that the entity still lingered, waiting in the shadows for the next unwary explorer to breach its domain. The whispers from the depths of the hollow line continued, a haunting melody that called to those who dared to listen. The days following my escape from the hollow line passed in a blur. The world seemed different, as if I was viewing it through a distorted lens. The once thrilling call of abandoned places now held a note of warning, a reminder of the fine line between curiosity and recklessness. I couldn't bring myself to write about the hollow line on my blog. How could I? To write about it would be to acknowledge it fully, to relive the horrors I had witnessed. No, some secrets were meant to remain hidden, shrouded in the shadows of obscurity. The hollow line had changed me. No longer was I the fearless urban explorer, seeking out the forgotten and the abandoned. Now, I found myself advocating for respect and caution when treading into these lost places. I warned others of the dangers, not just physical but psychological, that lurked in such expeditions. The hollow line remained a silent specter in my life, a haunting memory that refused to fade. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I would hear whispers, soft and distant, as if carried by the wind from the depths of that cursed station. It was a chilling reminder that the entity, and the souls it ensnared, were still out there, somewhere in the darkness. I often wondered about the fate of those lost souls. Would they forever doomed to wander the corridors of the hollow line, trapped in an endless cycle of despair? Or was there a chance for their release, a hope that they might one day find peace? These questions lingered in my mind, unanswered. The hollow line remained a topic of urban legends and ghost stories, its truth known only to me, and the shadows that dwelled within. I kept my silence, out of fear and respect, knowing that some doors, once opened, could never be fully closed. As time passed, I slowly returned to my explorations, but with a newfound caution and reverence for the stories and secrets held within each site. But the hollow line was different. It was a chapter of my life that I close, a haunting experience that I would carry with me always. The city moved on, oblivious to the darkness that lurked beneath its bustling streets. The hollow line remained a ghost, a whisper in the wind, a chilling reminder of the unknown that awaits in the forgotten corners of the world. It was a place of fear and mystery, a place that I had escaped, but one that would forever hold a piece of me in its shadowy embrace. I never thought much about the mysteries that old buildings could hold. That was until I moved into an apartment just off campus in a quaint college town. I was a history major, fascinated by ancient civilizations, their languages, and their cultures. My new home was an old red brick building with ivy crawling up its sides, giving it a charm that I found irresistible. The apartment inside was just as intriguing, with antique furnishings and shelves filled with old books. It was like stepping into another era. My roommate, Sarah, was a bit of an enigma. She was quiet, almost too quiet, with an air of mystery that surrounded her. She had this faraway look in her eyes, like she was always lost in thought. We didn't talk much, but there was a sense of camaraderie in our shared silence. I often found her reading books I couldn't quite understand, their covers worn and their pages yellowed with age. She was an English major, yet the literature she perused seemed far more ancient than anything from our syllabi. Our first few weeks together were uneventful. I was busy with my classes, delving into the world of forgotten languages and lost civilizations. The apartment was a peaceful haven, a place where I could study and unwind after long days. It was during one such night, as I lay in bed, the moon casting a pale light through my window, that I first heard Sarah speak in her sleep. It started as a low murmur, a string of syllables that didn't make sense. I found myself sitting up, straining my ears to catch the words. They were unlike anything I had heard before, guttural, yet melodic, like a language lost to time. My heart raced as I listened, a mix of curiosity and an inexplicable fear gripping me. The next morning, I casually mentioned it to Sarah over breakfast. She laughed it off, a touch of embarrassment in her smile. "Just sleep talking, I guess," she said, brushing it off. But her laughter didn't reach her eyes, and I wondered if she was hiding something. That night, and many nights after, the sleep talking continued. Each time, I would lay awake, listening to the strange language that Sarah whispered in her dreams. It was unsettling, how she never remembered it in the morning, always dismissing it as nothing. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that it was something more, something ancient and unknown. My curiosity got the better of me. I started recording Sarah's nocturnal utterances, hoping to make sense of them. Night after night, I played the recordings, listening to the strange dialect that seemed almost archaic. It was during one of my history lectures that a startling realization dawned on me. The cadence, the structure of the sounds, they bore a striking resemblance to an ancient dialect I'd been studying, one belonging to a civilization long forgotten, known for their esoteric rituals and occult practices. I delved deeper into my research, poring over texts and academic journals, trying to decipher the connection. My studies took a backseat as this obsession grew. Meanwhile, strange things began happening around the apartment. Objects would move from where I left them, shadows seemed to linger longer than they should, and at times, I felt like I was being watched. I told myself it was just stress, a side effect of my overactive imagination. But then, Sarah's behavior started to change. She became more withdrawn, her periods of silence growing longer. Sometimes, she would just stare blankly at a wall, whispering to herself in that same eerie dialect. I would call out to her, and she would snap back to reality, confused and unaware of her own actions. It was like she was two different people, and I couldn't tell which one was the real Sarah. One particularly unsettling discovery was a hidden compartment in Sarah's room that I stumbled upon by accident. Inside, there were old leather-bound books and parchment scrolls in a language I couldn't identify, alongside a collection of strange archaic symbols. It was as if Sarah was living a double life, one that she herself wasn't aware of. I confronted her about it, but she had no recollection of the compartment or its contents. Her genuine confusion only added to my growing sense of dread. What was happening to my roommate? And how was I connected to it all? The more I investigated, the clearer it became that the language Sarah spoke in her sleep was indeed the same ancient dialect from my studies. But how? She had no background in ancient languages, no interest in history. It made no sense. Yet every night, her whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if she was trying to communicate with something unseen. It was then that I started noticing the symbols from her hidden compartment appearing around the apartment, etched into the woodwork, appearing in the steam on the bathroom mirror. There were the same symbols from the ancient texts, symbols associated with rituals of summoning and invocation. My heart sank as I realized the terrifying truth. Sarah, in her sleep, was performing an ancient ritual, and whatever she was calling to, it was answering. The night everything came to a head is etched forever in my memory. The air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken energy. I lay in bed, restless, the recorder on my nightstand ready. As the clock ticked past midnight, Sarah's whispers began, louder and more forceful than ever before. I slipped out of bed and crept to her door, which was slightly ajar. Peering inside, I saw Sarah sitting up in bed, her eyes closed, her hands moving in deliberate ritualistic gestures. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over her, illuminating the strange symbols drawn hastily around her. The air in the room was thick, almost suffocating. I could feel the hair on my neck stand up as a cold dread washed over me. As she chanted, the room seemed to warp and shift, shadows dancing along the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. I wanted to run, to scream, but I was rooted to the spot, my body unwilling to respond. It was like a waking nightmare, with the boundaries between reality and the otherworldly blurring before my eyes. Then, with a final guttural shout from Sarah, it happened. A gust of wind blew the door open, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into darkness. A low, rumbling sound filled the air, growing louder, vibrating through the very walls of the apartment. From the darkness, a figure began to materialize, a swirling mass of shadows and whispers. I should have been scared, terrified even, but a strange resolve took over me. I couldn't let whatever was happening come to fruition. I lunged forward, grabbing Sarah, shaking her violently in an attempt to wake her. Her eyes snapped open, but they were void of recognition, black pools staring back at me. The figure in the shadows grew more defined, a presence so malevolent that it was almost tangible. I could feel its hatred, its hunger. It was ancient, powerful, and it had been called here by Sarah's unwitting indications. I didn't know what to do, but I knew we had to break the connection. With all the strength I could muster, I dragged Sarah out of the room, her chants now turning into screams. The figure seemed to recoil, the shadows dissipating as we moved away. We collapsed in the living room, Sarah finally coming to her senses, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What's happening?" she cried, her voice trembling. I had no answers, only the horrifying realization that we had unleashed something that should have remained forgotten. We had to find a way to send it back. In the days following the harrowing event, Sarah's health rapidly deteriorated. She was plagued by feverish nightmares, her body weakening as if drained by an unseen force. Medical tests offered no answers, leaving us in a state of desperate uncertainty. I knew it was my responsibility to find a solution, to reverse whatever had been set in motion. I returned to the university, seeking help from my history professor, Dr. Adler, a renowned expert in ancient civilizations. With trepidation, I shared the recordings of Sarah's sleep talking and the events that had transpired. Dr. Adler listened intently, his expression growing graver with each passing moment. "This is far beyond anything I've encountered," he admitted, his voice laced with concern. "But I believe I can help you." Together, we pored over ancient texts and esoteric manuscripts, searching for a way to counteract the rituals Sarah had unknowingly performed. The solution, we discovered, lay in an obscure ritualistic counter-invocation, designed to sever connections with entities from the ancient world. The preparation for the ritual was meticulous. We gathered the necessary artifacts and symbols, recreating the ancient setting as closely as possible. Dr. Adler instructed me on the precise pronunciation of the counter-invocation, emphasizing the importance of each syllable. The weight of our task was immense, the tension palpable as we readied ourselves to face the unknown. As night fell, we began the ritual in the apartment, the same room where everything had started. Dr. Adler led the incantations, his voice steady and commanding. I followed, my voice wavering but determined. The air around us seemed to crackle, the shadows at the edges of the room undulating as if alive. Midway through the ritual, a violent wind erupted within the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. A deafening roar filled the space, the very walls seeming to shake in protest. But we did not falter, we continued to chant, our voices rising above the chaos. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything ceased. The wind died down, the oppressive presence that had lingered in the apartment dissipating like a bad dream. In the eerie silence that followed, Dr. Adler and I exchanged glances, a mix of relief and disbelief in our eyes. We had done it. We had broken the ritual's hold over Sarah and banished the entity back to the depths from which it came. The sense of normalcy that returned to the apartment was almost surreal, a stark contrast to the nightmare we had endured. Sarah gradually recovered, her strength returning with each passing day. She had no memory of the events, no understanding of the role she had. Yet, as life returned to its mundane rhythm, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that lingered. We had tampered with forces beyond our comprehension, forces that, despite our efforts, might not be so easily contained. The world of the ancient and the unknown had touched ours, and I feared it was only a matter of time before it reached out again. The world slowly returned to its normal pace, but the shadows of those events lingered in the corners of my mind. Sarah, blissfully unaware of the darkness that had almost consumed her, returned to her usual self. But the experience had changed me. I was no longer just a student of history, I had lived it, felt its terrifying power firsthand. I continued my studies with a newfound respect for the ancient world and its mysteries. Yet, I couldn't help but feel a watchful presence, a reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. The true resolution came unexpectedly, months later, as I walked through the university halls. I overheard a conversation between a group of students. One of them, a new face in the history department, spoke in a language that made my blood run cold. It was the same ancient dialect that Sarah had uttered in her sleep. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. The student laughed, brushing off his friend's confusion, claiming it was just something he picked up from an old book. But the familiarity of the situation was too striking to ignore. In that moment, I realized the cycle hadn't been broken, it had merely shifted, finding a new vessel. The ancient forces we had dealt with were still at play, their whispers echoing through time, seeking willing or unwitting participants for their cryptic designs. As I walked away, a chilling thought took root in my mind. Our encounter with the ancient invocation was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger, unseen tapestry woven through the ages. The shadows of the past, it seemed, were never far behind, lurking in the depths of forgotten languages and lost civilizations. And somewhere, out there in the world, the ancient dialect continued to be spoken, carrying with it the echoes of a past that refused to be silenced. A past that could, at any moment, reach out to entangle the present in its enigmatic and terrifying embrace. The first time I saw the old farmhouse, with its weathered walls and creaky wooden porch, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. City life had become too much, too loud, too fast. I needed an escape, a place to find myself again. That's why when I learned I'd inherited this remote property from a great uncle I barely remembered, it seemed like fate. The house sat in the middle of vast fields that stretched to the horizon, a sea of green and gold. It was a picturesque, tranquil sight. Yet, there was one thing that unsettled me from the start: an old scarecrow, standing solemnly in the field. It was typical, made of straw and old clothes, but there was something about its crooked stance, and the way it faced the house that gave me an eerie feeling. I pushed the thought aside, attributing my unease to the newness of rural life. I decided to focus on settling in, telling myself I'd get used to the silence, the isolation, and yes, even the scarecrow. The first few days passed uneventfully as I busied myself with unpacking and exploring the property. But then, something strange started happening. Each morning, as I sipped my coffee on the porch, I couldn't shake the feeling that the scarecrow was closer to the house than it had been the day before. I laughed at myself for even entertaining such a ridiculous thought. It was probably just my imagination, or maybe local kids moving it for a laugh. Still, I couldn't deny the growing sense of unease. Each day, the scarecrow's new position seemed undeniably closer. One evening, unable to contain my curiosity, I walked out to the scarecrow. Up close, it was even more unsettling. Its face, a burlap sack with button eyes and a stitched smile, seemed almost mocking under the moonlit sky. I examined it for any sign of tampering, but found nothing. Shaking my head, I returned to the house, telling myself it was all in my mind. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. In the following days, my unease turned to paranoia. Each morning confirmed my worst fears: the scarecrow was moving closer to the house. I couldn't understand how or why, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I inspected the scarecrow during the day, searching for any clue that might explain the mystery. But it was just an ordinary scarecrow, lifeless and still. One afternoon, I decided to visit the nearest neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly lady who had lived in the area her whole life. Over a cup of tea, I cautiously brought up the scarecrow. Her reaction was immediate and chilling. She told me a legend about a scarecrow that was said to protect the land, but at a terrible cost. It was a story passed down through generations, one she admitted she never fully believed. That night, things took a turn for the worse. I was jolted awake by the sound of rustling outside my window. Heart pounding, I peered out, but it was too dark to see anything. The next morning, I found footprints in the dirt around the house. They were spaced far apart, as if whatever made them was taking large lurching steps. The scarecrow was now unsettlingly close to the house, its button eyes seeming to stare directly at me. The night the scarecrow appeared at my window was the worst of my life. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within me as thunder roared and lightning illuminated the room intermittently. There it was, pressed against the glass, its burlap face grotesque and menacing in the flickering light. In a desperate search for answers, I rummaged through old boxes and papers left in the attic by my great-uncle. What I found chilled me to the bone: newspaper clippings and journal entries about mysterious disappearances in the area, all dating back decades. The last entry spoke of the scarecrow, warning of its sinister nature. With dawning horror, I realized I had to destroy the scarecrow. It was the source of the terror, the key to ending this nightmare. But as I prepared to face it, the scarecrow vanished. I scoured the fields in the pouring rain, but it was nowhere to be found. That night, the house itself turned against me. Doors slammed shut on their own, windows rattled violently, and I heard whispers in the dark corners of the rooms. I was trapped, haunted by an unseen force. The final encounter with the scarecrow happened on what I swore would be my last night in that cursed house. It was in the hallway, standing at the end of the corridor, lit by the flickering lights. Its stitched smile seemed whiter, more sinister. I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear as it began to lurch towards me, straw fingers reaching out. In that moment, a primal instinct took over. I lunged forward, grabbing a nearby fireplace poker. The scarecrow, surprisingly strong, fought back, its straw limbs flailing wildly. The struggle was surreal, like wrestling a nightmare into submission. Finally, with a desperate effort, I managed to set it ablaze using the fireplace. It burned rapidly, filling the house with the acrid smell of smoke. The next thing I remember was running out into the night, watching from a distance as the flames consumed the scarecrow. The house remained untouched, as if the fire was unnaturally contained to just eradicate my tormentor. Exhausted and traumatized, I left the farmhouse behind that night. I didn't look back, not even once. The city, with all its noise and chaos, suddenly seemed like a sanctuary. The story of the creeping scarecrow remains with me, a haunting memory that I can't quite shake. I heard that the farmhouse was put up for sale again, and sometimes I wonder about the new residents, about whether the scarecrow was truly gone, or just waiting in the fields for its next victim. And so, the legend continues. Each time I close my eyes, I see those button eyes and that stitched smile, and I know that some horrors are too real to be dismissed as just a scarecrow in a field. I've always been drawn to the unexplainable. The shadowy corners of human knowledge where science and reason dare not tread. I'm a third-year college student majoring in folklore and mythology. The small town where I live and study, nestled in the heart of the mountains, is steeped in its own share of mysteries and legends. It was in this setting, amidst the dusty shelves of the town's old library, that my story begins. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind that whispered promises of rain but never quite delivered. The library was nearly empty, save for the occasional student and the ever-present stoic librarian. I was there for a research project, but as it often happened, my curiosity led me astray. That's when I stumbled upon it. An old, leather-bound book with pages yellowed by time, titled simply Arcane Rituals and Occult Practices. The book was filled with various rites and rituals, but one in particular caught my eye, the Shadowed Circle. The text claimed it was a ritual of ancient origin, allowing the practitioner to peer through the veils of time. The instructions were clear, but came with stern warnings of the dangers of peering into the unknown. Something about it captivated me. It wasn't just academic interest, it was deeper, almost primal. I needed to know more, to see for myself what secrets the Shadowed Circle held. And so, my journey into the unknown began. The more I read about the Shadowed Circle, the more it consumed my thoughts. It described a ritual that promised visions of the past and glimpses of the future, but at a potentially great cost. Every line in the book cautioned about the perils of awakening what lies beyond the veil. Yet, the lure of the unknown was irresistible to me. The ritual required precise preparation and conditions. It was to be performed alone, at midnight, in a room lit only by the soft glow of 5 candles. A large circle had to be drawn on the ground with specific symbols and runes inscribed within. At the north end of the circle, a mirror was to be placed, and the participant had to sit in the center, facing it. Despite the ominous warnings, my decision was made. I had to experience the ritual myself. The thought of uncovering hidden truths, of witnessing the fabric of time unfold, was too tantalizing to ignore. I gathered the necessary items. A large antique mirror I found in a thrift store, candles, chalk for the circle, and an object of personal significance, a locket given to me by my grandmother. That night, as the clock struck midnight, I began drawing the circle in the chosen room. The air grew heavy, filled with a sense of anticipation. I inscribed the arcane symbols with painstaking care, feeling a strange energy coursing through them. Finally, I sat in the center of the circle, the mirror before me and the candles casting flickering shadows. With a deep breath, I began reciting the incantations from the book, my voice steady, but growing increasingly apprehensive with each word. As I spoke, the room seemed to darken, the candlelight struggling against an encroaching, unnatural shadow. I should have been afraid, but my curiosity propelled me forward. The world outside the circle started to blur, the edges of my vision smearing into darkness, as if the room itself was being swallowed by the night. The air grew thick, heavy with a sense of something ancient and unfathomable, stirring to life. My heart raced, thudding loudly in my ears, yet I persisted with the incantations, each word resonating deeper within me. As the ritual progressed, the mirror began to change. No longer did it reflect the room and my anxious face. It rippled like the surface of a dark pond, revealing fleeting images and shadows that danced at the periphery of my vision. Whispers filled the room, voices that were neither male nor female, old as time and speaking in tongues long forgotten. The visions in the mirror grew clear. I saw scenes of the past, some familiar from history books, others personal and intimate. I watched moments of love and joy, but these quickly gave way to darker, more disturbing images. Scenes of sorrow, pain, and loss, wars, plagues, and disasters, faces twisted in anguish. It was both mesmerizing and horrifying. The more I watched, the more I felt myself being pulled into the mirror's depths. The room around me faded away until there was nothing but the mirror and its haunting visions. Time lost meaning. I was a captive audience to the relentless march of history's darkest moments. And then, the future began to unfold. It was like peering into a swirling maelstrom of possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Cities I didn't recognize lay in ruins, people running in fear from unseen horrors. Faces contorted in terror flashed by, similarly familiar. Fear gripped me. What had I unleashed? This was no longer a simple glimpse into the unknown, it felt like an unrelenting torrent of mankind's deepest fears and secrets. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes and end the ritual, but something held me in place, a force beyond my understanding, compelling me to witness these horrors. In the heart of this maelstrom of visions, a singular, harrowing moment crystallized before me. The mirror's surface, no longer just a passive display, seemed to be a gateway, and from it, something was emerging. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, began to take form. It was a figure, human-like yet distinctly otherworldly, its features obscured as if made of smoke and whispers. The air around me grew oppressively cold, and I could see my breath fogging in the candlelight. The figure in the mirror reached out, its hand pressing against the glass, distorting reality itself. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, a primal fear that gnawed at the edges of my mind. Its voice, when it finally spoke, was like the rustling of dead leaves and the groaning of old trees. It offered me secrets, knowledge beyond human comprehension, the answers to questions I hadn't dared to ask. But its words were laced with malice, a promise of a price to be paid that was far greater than I could imagine. I realized then the grave mistake I had made. The ritual was not a mere window into time, it was a door, and I had unwittingly opened it. Panic surged through me. I had to end the ritual, to close the door before something irreversible happened. With every ounce of willpower I possessed, I tore my gaze away from the mirror, breaking the hypnotic hold the figure had over me. I scrambled to my feet, my hands shaking as I overturned the candles, smudging the meticulously drawn symbols. The circle, my only protection, was broken. As the candles went out, the room plunged into darkness. The oppressive presence of the figure loomed over me, but as quickly as it had manifested, it receded. The whispers died down, and the cold grip of fear loosened. I was left alone in the dark, my heart pounding, the echo of the figure's words still lingering in the air. In the suffocating darkness, I fumbled for the light switch, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The room, once illuminated, appeared normal, as if the nightmarish events had been a figment of my imagination. But the cracked surface of the mirror and the disrupted circle of chalk and candle wax told a different story. I sat there on the floor, trying to steady my breathing, trying to rationalize what had just happened. The figure in the mirror, the visions of despair and chaos, they were too vivid, too visceral to dismiss as mere hallucinations. The reality of the ritual and its consequences began to sink in. I had delved into a realm far beyond my understanding, and in my arrogance, I had invited something into our world. The shattered remnants of the mirror seemed to mock my hubris. I couldn't bear to look at it anymore, afraid that the shadowy figure might reappear. With a mix of fear and determination, I gathered every piece of the mirror and the ritual components. I knew I had to destroy them, to erase any trace of what I had done. That night, I burned the book and buried the mirror's fragments deep in the woods. The flames consumed the pages with an unnatural fervor, as if the book was eager to be rid of its secrets. I watched until the last ember died, a hollow feeling in my chest. Returning home, I found no solace in sleep. My dreams were haunted by echoes of the ritual, the whispering voices, the apocalyptic visions, the malevolent presence in the mirror. I woke up repeatedly, drenched in sweat, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The days that followed were a blur. I avoided the library and the curious glances of my classmates. I jumped to shadows, at the slightest of noises, always expecting to see the figure from the mirror lurking just out of sight. The impact of that night lingered long after. The once familiar corridors of the college, the streets of the small town, even my own apartment, felt alien and menacing. I kept to myself, speaking to no one about the ritual or the horrors I had witnessed. The fear of being dismissed as delusional or, worse, of drawing unwanted attention to what I had uncovered, kept me silent. I couldn't escape the feeling that something had changed fundamentally, both within me and in the world around me. The mirror, though destroyed, seemed to have left an indelible mark on my psyche. The shattered image haunted my waking thoughts and my dreams, the constant reminder of the unknown that now felt uncomfortably close. The once thrilling allure of the paranormal and the occult had turned bitter. My books on folklore and mythology, once treasured sources of knowledge, now gathered dust on my shelves. I couldn't bear to open them, fearful of what other truths they might hold. Days turned into weeks, and the vividness of that night began to fade, but the unease never fully dissipated. I found myself avoiding mirrors, uneasy at the thought of what might be looking back from the other side. The mundane world felt like a thin veil, behind which lurked unfathomable darkness, just out of sight, but always present. As time passed, I attempted to rebuild some semblance of normalcy. I focused on my studies, on the tangible and explainable. Yet, a part of me remained trapped in that circle, facing the mirror, forever changed by the glimpse into the abyss. The story of a shadowed circle ended for me that night, but the questions and fears it raised remained unanswered, a whisper in the back of my mind. What had I truly seen? What had I unleashed? These questions haunted me, a constant reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. I learned a hard lesson about the cost of seeking knowledge that was never meant for human eyes. The world is full of mysteries, some of which are better left unexplored. As for the shadowed figure and the horrors it showed me, I can only hope they remain confined to the shattered fragments of that mirror, never to emerge into our reality again. I sat in my small cluttered apartment, planning my next photography expedition. I was a freelance photographer with a penchant for capturing the hidden beauties of the world. My life was a mosaic of journeys, each snapshot telling a story of distant lands and forgotten places. Yet, despite my adventurous spirit, I had always been cursed with a terrible sense of direction. Without my GPS, I was as lost as a ship without a compass in the vast ocean. It was on a crisp Wednesday morning when I received an unexpected package. Wrapped in plain brown paper, it bore no return address, only my name scribbled in hasty handwriting. Inside, nestled amongst a nest of bubble wrap, was a sleek, state-of-the-art GPS system. It was unlike any I had seen before. Its screen shimmered with a clarity that was almost hypnotic, and it felt unusually heavy in my hands. A small note was tucked beneath it, with just 2 cryptic words. Explore freely. Initially, I was thrilled. The device was a marvel, responding to my commands with an almost intuitive ease. For the first few days, it guided me flawlessly through the city's labyrinthine streets, its voice a soothing presence in the solitude of my car. I grew to trust it implicitly, a trust that I would soon come to regret. The day I planned to leave for the countryside, the sun was a brilliant orb in the clear blue sky, a perfect day for photography. My destination was a renowned scenic spot known for its lush greenery and vibrant wildlife. I keyed into coordinates, anticipating a day of tranquil nature and photographic bliss. But the GPS had other plans. As I followed its directions, the familiar cityscape gradually gave way to more rural surroundings. I didn't notice anything amiss at first, entranced by the scenic beauty. It wasn't until the paved roads turned to gravel, and the gravel to dirt, that a sliver of doubt wormed its way into my mind. When the voice of the GPS, once so clear and reassuring, directed me down a narrow, overgrown path, I knew something was terribly wrong. The path led me to a place that seemed untouched by time, an abandoned village, its buildings decrepit, their once vibrant colors faded and peeling. A heavy silence hung over the place, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, thick and unyielding. I stopped the car, my heart racing with a mix of fear and confusion. This couldn't be right. I tried to re-enter my intended destination, but the GPS was adamant, rerouting me back to this eerie ghost town every time. I should have turned back then, should have ignored the gnawing curiosity that whispered in my ear. But there was something about the village, something that beckoned me with an almost magnetic pull. With a mixture of trepidation and intrigue, I stepped out of my car and into the unknown, not realizing that I was walking into a nightmare that had been waiting for me all along. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, as I ventured into the heart of the abandoned village. Each step felt like a trespass into a realm forgotten by time. The houses, lined up like silent sentinels, bore the scars of neglect. Windows were boarded up, and doors hung loosely on their hinges. Nature had begun to reclaim the place, with vines creeping up the walls and wildflowers sprouting through the cracks in the pavement. Despite the sunlight, a chilling shadow seemed to loom over the village, as if the light itself was hesitant to fully penetrate this forsaken place. I lifted my camera, trying to capture the eerie beauty of the decay, but the images seemed to blur inexplicably on the screen, as though the village was resisting being photographed. As I wandered deeper, I noticed strange symbols etched into some of the doorframes and walls. They were unlike any I had seen before, a series of angular lines and circles, forming patterns that made my head throb if I looked at them too long. There was an unsettling feeling that these symbols held meanings I couldn't comprehend, secrets that were not meant for me. The GPS, which I had almost forgotten in my pocket, suddenly sprang to life. It began speaking in a language I couldn't recognize, the words distorted and guttural, sending a shiver down my spine. The screen flickered with static, briefly displaying coordinates before reverting to the cryptic language. Compelled by an inexplicable urge, I followed the coordinates, leading me deeper into the village. I passed what looked like a town square, with a dried-up fountain at its center. Surrounding it were remnants of what might have once been a marketplace. Tattered awnings flapped in the gentle breeze, and stalls lay overturned, their contents long since pilfered or rotted away. It was a ghostly tableau of daily life, frozen in time. The further I walked, the more the village seemed to stir around me. Shadows shifted in the corners of my eyes, and I heard faint whispers echoing between the buildings. The air grew colder, a chill that seeped into my bones. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but part of me knew these were not natural phenomena. My journey ended at the doorstep of a particularly decrepit house. Its windows were so caked with grime that no light shone through, and the door was adorned with the same cryptic symbols I had seen earlier, only far more elaborate. The GPS voice, now clear again, urged me to enter in a tone that brooked no argument. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to escape this place and never look back. But something stronger, something darker, compelled me to push the door open and step inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world outside seemed to fall away, leaving me trapped in the heart of the village's secret, a secret that was waiting just for me. The door creaked ominously as I stepped into the house, the sound echoing through the silent interior like a warning. A musty smell assaulted my senses, the air thick with the dust of decades. Dim light filtered through the dirty windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. The house felt alive, as if it was breathing around me, its walls pulsating with a slow, steady rhythm. I moved cautiously, my footsteps muffled by the layer of dust that carpeted the floor. The house was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms, each more dilapidated than the last. Peeling wallpaper adorned the walls, and broken furniture lay scattered, as if the inhabitants had left in a hurry, never to return. I felt like an intruder in a tomb, the weight of unseen eyes following my every move. As I ventured deeper, the GPS continued its eerie litany in that unknown language, its screen flickering intermittently. The house seemed to respond to its voice, the air growing colder, the shadows darker. I tried to turn it off, but it refused to obey, its screen glowing with an otherworldly light. I stumbled upon a room that was different from the others. It was small and cramped, with walls lined with shelves filled with old books and trinkets. In the center of the room was a large, antique desk, covered in papers and photographs. But it was the photographs that froze me in my tracks. They were pictures of me. Not just recent photos, but images spanning my entire life. There were pictures from my childhood, from high school, from my travels around the world. Some were taken from afar, others up close, capturing moments I had long forgotten. It was as if my entire life had been documented by an unseen observer. Panic clawed at my chest, my heart pounding in my ears. How was this possible? Who had been following me? The realization that I had been watched, stalked even, for years was a violation beyond comprehension. Then the GPS spoke again, its voice now clear and chillingly familiar. It spoke my name, beckoning me to look deeper. Drawn by a force I couldn't resist, I sifted through the papers on the desk. They were filled with handwritten notes in a language I couldn't understand, accompanied by sketches of the symbols I had seen in the village. The final piece of the puzzle was a tattered journal, its pages yellowed with age. The entries were written in a frantic, barely legible scrawl, detailing a ritual tied to the village. It spoke of a dark entity that demanded a tribute, a life to be bound to the village forever. The last entry was incomplete, ending abruptly in the middle of a sentence. I felt a chill run down my spine as I pieced together the truth. The GPS, the village, the photographs, they were all part of a sinister design to lure me here, to complete the ritual that had been abandoned years ago. I was meant to be the final piece, the last tribute to whatever malevolent force lurked within these walls. The house seemed to close in around me, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. I had to get out, had to escape this nightmare. But as I turned to leave, the room darkened, the shadows coalescing into a tangible presence. The entity from the journal was here, and it wasn't going to let me leave easily. The room darkened, the air thickening around me as the entity made its presence known. Shadows swirled like smoke, coalescing into a formless mass that pulsed with a malevolent energy. The temperature plummeted, my breath turning to mist in the icy air. The GPS lay forgotten on the desk, its screen a beacon of eerie light in the growing darkness. I could feel the entity's gaze upon me, a pressure that bore down on my soul. It was as if it was peering into the very core of my being, searching for something hidden deep within. Fear gripped me, a primal, overwhelming terror that threatened to paralyze me. But amidst the fear, a spark of defiance kindled within me. I was not going to be a pawn in this twisted game. With a shaky breath, I reached for the camera hanging around my neck. If this entity was bound to the village, perhaps capturing it on film would give me some leverage, some way to break its hold over me. I raised the camera, the lens focusing on the writhing mass. The entity reacted violently, the room shaking as if in the throes of an earthquake. Objects flew off the shelves, books and trinkets hurtling through the air like missiles. I ducked, covering my head with my arms, as the world around me descended into chaos. Amidst the cacophony, a voice echoed in my mind, a voice that was not my own. It was ancient, filled with malice and pain. It spoke of centuries of loneliness, of a hunger that could never be sated. It promised me eternal suffering if I did not submit, if I did not become part of the village forever. But I refused to give in. With a surge of adrenaline, I took the picture, the camera's flash slicing through the darkness like a blade. The entity recoiled as if struck, its form wavering, the shadows dissipating momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, I bolted from the room, the house groaning in protest as I fled. The corridors twisted and turned, disorienting me, as if the house itself was trying to trap me. I stumbled and fell, my hands scraping against the rough, dusty floor. Panic surged within me, a desperate clawing need to escape. But I pushed forward, driven by sheer survival instinct. Finally, I saw the front door ahead, its outline faintly visible in the dim light. I lunged towards it, my hand closing around the doorknob. With all my strength, I pulled it open, a blast of fresh air hitting my face. I stumbled out into the village, the entity's enraged screams echoing behind me. The house seemed to shudder, its windows flashing with an otherworldly light. Then, with a deafening roar, it collapsed, the walls imploding inwards, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the sky. Exhausted, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. The village was silent now, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. It was over. I had escaped the entity's grasp, but at what cost? The images of the photographs, the voice of the entity, they were etched into my mind, a haunting reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. As I looked up at the sky, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon, I knew that my life would never be the same. The village, the entity, the ritual, they were all part of a nightmare that had become all too real. And as I made my way back to my car, the remnants of the house still smoldering in the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The drive back to the city was a blur, my mind still reeling from the nightmarish events at the village. The once comforting hum of the car's engine now sounded like a distant echo, muffled by the thick fog of my thoughts. The GPS, now silent and inert, sat like a discarded relic on the passenger seat, a reminder of the ordeal I had narrowly escaped. As the city's skyline came into view, bathed in the soft light of dawn, a sense of surrealism washed over me. The normalcy of the waking world seemed at odds with the horrors I had witnessed. People went about their morning routines, oblivious to the dark secrets that lay just beyond their perception. I parked my car in the familiar spot outside my apartment, the events at the village replaying in my mind. The photographs, the entity, the collapsing house, it all felt like a grotesque tapestry woven from the threads of my own life. I knew I couldn't just forget what had happened, couldn't pretend it was all a bad dream. But where did I even begin to seek answers? I trudged up the stairs to my apartment, each step heavy with exhaustion. Inside, I slumped onto the couch, the adrenaline that had sustained me now drained away. I was left with a bone-deep weariness and a gnawing sense of dread. The images from the village haunted me, flashes of memory that flickered at the edges of my consciousness. Sleep was elusive, my dreams plagued by shadowy figures and whispered threats. The entity's voice lingered in my mind, a constant menacing presence. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat, the remnants of nightmares clinging to me like cobwebs. When morning came, I was a shell of myself, hollowed out by fear and confusion. I knew I couldn't face this alone, that I needed to share my story, if only to prove to myself that it was real. But who would believe such a tale? To the rational mind, it would sound like the ramblings of a madman. I turned to the one place where my story might be accepted, the online world of forums and chat rooms. There, tales of the strange and supernatural were commonplace, shared by those who had experienced the unexplainable. I typed out my story, every detail I could recall, and hit post, sending my experience into the digital ether. The responses were a mix of skepticism, fear, and fascination. Some users offered theories, others shared similar experiences. But one message stood out, a private message from a user who claimed to know about the village. They spoke of a curse, of a cycle that had to be completed, and warned that my escape was only temporary. My heart sank as I read the message. The idea that I was still bound to that place, that the entity's influence extended beyond the village, was a terror I couldn't face. But as much as I wanted to dismiss it as just another online myth, the events I had lived through were proof that some horrors were all too real. I was left with an unshakable feeling of being watched, a paranoia that clung to me like a second skin. The city around me felt different now, its familiar streets tinged with an unseen menace. I was trapped in a world where the lines between reality and nightmare had been irrevocably blurred. And as I tried to navigate this new reality, I couldn't shake the fear of what might come next. The entity had let me go once, but would it be so lenient a second time? The thought of being pulled back into that nightmare, of facing the horrors of the village again, was a prospect that filled me with dread. As I stared out of my apartment window, the city below a tapestry of light and shadow, I knew that the story was far from over. The village, the entity, the curse, they were all part of a larger, darker puzzle that I had unwittingly become a piece of. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across the buildings, I couldn't help but wonder if the entity was out there, watching, waiting for its next move in the macabre game it had started. The days that followed were descent into a world tinted with paranoia and fear. My once vibrant city life now felt like a hollow facade, each interaction tinged with the dread of the unseen and unknown. The ominous words of the mysterious online user echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the curse that might still bind me to that accursed village. In an attempt to find some semblance of normalcy, I tried to immerse myself in my work. Photography, once a source of joy and escape, now felt like a futile endeavor. The lens of my camera, which had once captured the beauty of the world, now seemed to only frame the shadows that lurked at the edge of my vision. The GPS, that cursed device, lay untouched in a drawer. I couldn't bring myself to dispose of it, yet I couldn't bear to look at it either. It was as if by keeping it close, I could somehow contain the malevolence it represented. Nights were the worst. Sleep was a rare visitor, and when it came, it brought with it dreams that were vivid and disturbing. I would find myself back in the village, the shadows whispering my name, the entity's presence suffocating me. I would wake up gasping for air, the line between dream and reality blurred. Then, one evening, as I sifted through my mail, my heart stopped. There, among the bills and junk mail, was a package. It was eerily similar to the one that had started it, all plain brown paper, my name scribbled on the front. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I tore it open, a sense of inevitable dread washing over me. Inside was a GPS, identical to the one I had received before. The screen flickered to life in my hands. The first time I put on those glasses, I thought it was just a trick of the light. I remember standing in that tiny, cluttered optician's shop, squinting at my reflection in a dusty mirror. The optician, a peculiar elderly man with a stooped back and keen eyes, had assured me these were special glasses. I had chuckled at that, dismissing it as a sales gimmick. I was a linguistics major at the local college, a fact I had shared with the optician during our casual conversation. He seemed intrigued by my passion for languages, both modern and ancient. As I left his shop with the new glasses, he whispered, almost cryptically, "You'll see the world differently with these." Back in my small, somewhat untidy apartment, as I settled in for the evening, I put on the glasses for a clearer view of the linguistics text I was studying. That's when I saw it for the first time: strange symbols, floating just above the book's title. There were no script I recognized, a jumble of lines and curves that made no sense. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was fatigue, but the symbols remained, undulating gently in the air. I spent that whole night examining the glasses, looking for some sort of digital display or projection technology. There was nothing. They were just ordinary, albeit strangely effective, glasses. As I drifted to sleep, the thought that lingered in my mind was not fear or worry, but a burning curiosity. What were these symbols, and why could I see them? The following day was when the true strangeness began. I wore the glasses to my morning lecture, a habit I'd formed ever since I got my prescription. As I walked through the bustling campus, I noticed the symbols again. This time, they weren't just hovering over my book, but above people's heads. Each person had a different set of symbols, a unique floating script that seemed to shimmer slightly in the air. My initial reaction was one of disbelief. I thought maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, a side effect of sleep deprivation or stress. But as the day wore on, the symbols remained, undeterred by my skeptical scrutiny. In class, I found it hard to concentrate on the professor's lecture, my attention drawn to the mysterious words above his head. As a linguistics student, I was fascinated. Here was a language, or something resembling one, that I had never seen before. It didn't match any ancient script I had studied or any contemporary language I was familiar with. I took to carrying a notebook with me, discreetly sketching the symbols I saw, trying to find patterns or repetitions. I knew I should have been concerned, maybe even scared, but my academic curiosity overshadowed everything else. I felt like I was on the verge of an incredible discovery, something groundbreaking in the field of linguistics. I was so consumed by this thought that I barely noticed my friends' concerned glances or the way I started to isolate myself, spending hours in my room, poring over the symbols. It was an obsession, I admit, but one that felt justified, even necessary. I had stumbled upon something unexplainable, and I couldn't just let it go. Little did I know, this fascination would lead me down a path far darker and more unsettling than any linguistics puzzle I had ever encountered. In the weeks that followed, my life became a cycle of attending classes and then rushing back to my apartment to study the symbols. I scoured every linguistic database I had access to, but found nothing. The symbols were like a language that didn't belong to any time or place known to history. Friends started dropping by less and less, put off by my obsession. I hardly noticed their absence, the mystery consumed me entirely. Gradually, I began to notice patterns. The symbols seemed to change with people's emotions or actions. A person laughing with friends had lighter, almost dancing scripts, whereas someone in a heated argument had sharp, jagged symbols. I also noticed that some people had longer strings of symbols, while others had only a few. It was like each set of symbols was a reflection of the person it hovered over. My friends and family became increasingly worried. My roommate, Mark, tried to confront me about my behavior. "You're always holed up in your room, scribbling in that notebook. You barely eat, and you've missed a bunch of classes," he said one evening, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. I barely listened, my eyes involuntarily flicking to the symbols above his head, wondering what they meant. Then, one night, I made a breakthrough. I had been studying the symbols above a stranger in a coffee shop when I realized that one of them kept repeating. I had seen it multiple times, across different people. After hours of cross-referencing and analysis, I managed to translate it. The symbol meant death. A chill ran down my spine. Was I seeing people's fates? The thought was both terrifying and intoxicating. I wanted to dismiss it as nonsense, a product of my overworked brain, but the linguist in me couldn't. The pattern was too consistent, the translation too clear. I was on the verge of something profound, something terrifying. The symbols were not just random, they were messages, and I had just begun to understand them. The realization that I might be seeing people's fates was like a weight pressing down on me, both exhilarating and terrifying. I tested my theory, observing people who had the death symbol over their heads. It was a grim vigil, one that wore heavily on my conscience. Then, it happened. One evening, I was sitting in a quiet corner of the library, my eyes flitting from person to person, notebook in hand. That's when I saw him, an older man, his face etched with lines of worry, the death symbol floating ominously above his head. But this time, there were more symbols, a string of them forming a coherent phrase. My hands trembled as I deciphered it. Accident on the way home. I watched, frozen, as the man gathered his belongings and left the library. Part of me wanted to run after him, to warn him, but another part was held back by fear and doubt. What if I was wrong? What if I was just imagining all this? The next day, the news confirmed my worst fears. There had been an accident. The man from the library had been fatally struck by a car on his way home. The symbols had been right. Panic gripped me. The realization that I could see people's deaths was overwhelming. I was tormented by the thought that I might have prevented it, that I had this knowledge and did nothing. But more than that, I was scared of the power the glasses seemed to possess. It was a responsibility I hadn't asked for and wasn't sure I could handle. In the days that followed, I became a shadow of myself, haunted by what I had seen and what it meant. I tried not to look at people, to avoid seeing their fates. But it was like trying to ignore the sun in the sky impossible. The symbols were always there, a constant reminder of the burden I now carried. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I had to find answers. I had to understand what these glasses were and why they had come into my possession. My only lead was the optician who had sold them to me. I had to go back to that strange little shop and confront him. But when I did, what I found only deepened the mystery and my sense of dread. In the wake of the tragedy, I found myself caught in a moral quagmire. Knowing the fates of those around me was a curse I couldn't escape. I tried to intervene a few times, to prevent what I saw, but it was futile. The events unfolded regardless of my actions, as if the symbols were not predictions but immutable truths. Desperate for answers, I returned to the optician's shop. The familiar bell chimed as I entered, but the cozy clutter I remembered was gone. In its place was an empty room, dust swirling in the air where shelves of glasses once stood. The optician was nowhere to be found. It was as if the shop had never existed. I left the empty shop feeling more alone than ever. The one person who might have shed light on my situation had vanished into thin air. My friends, concerned by my erratic behavior and obsession, had started to keep their distance. I couldn't blame them, I barely recognized myself anymore. I spent my days wandering the city, haunted by the symbols and the knowledge they imparted. The glasses had become a part of me, a lens through which I saw the world, whether I wore them or not. They had altered something fundamental in my perception, a change I feared was irreversible. The isolation was suffocating, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out. How could I explain what I was experiencing? Who would believe me? The symbols were my burden alone to bear. In the end, I made a decision. I stopped wearing the glasses. It didn't stop the visions completely, but it dulled them, made them less intrusive. I tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, to reconnect with my friends and resume my studies. But the experience had changed me in ways I couldn't undo. The symbols still haunted the edges of my vision, a ghostly reminder of what I had seen and what I still knew. I learned to live with it, to ignore it as best I could. But there was always a part of me that remained on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The final twist came one quiet evening as I passed a mirror in my apartment. My reflection stared back at me, tired and worn. And there, hovering above my head, were symbols I hadn't seen before. New, ominous, and undeciphered. I stood there for a long time, staring at the reflection, at the unknown script that spelled out a fate I couldn't read. It was a chilling reminder that the mystery was far from solved, that there were still secrets hidden in the depths of those symbols. And somewhere, out there in the world, the glasses that had started it all were waiting, their lenses holding truths too terrifying to comprehend. I've always felt out of place in my hometown. It's a quaint and quiet place where the tallest building was the steeple of the old church at the town square. People here lived by the church's bells, its chimes dictating their daily routines. I was never like them. My name is Aaron, and while I grew up in the shadow of that steeple, my mind wandered to places far beyond its reach. From a young age, I found solace in books, particularly those about theology and ancient religions. My curiosity was insatiable, leading me to question the blind faith that seemed to envelop the town. It wasn't that I didn't believe, it was that I wanted to understand what I believed in. But in this town, questions were often met with disapproving glances rather than answers. One afternoon, as the autumn leaves danced to the ground, I stumbled upon a dusty old bookstore tucked away in an alley. It was as if the store had been waiting for me, hidden from the world. Inside, amidst the musty smell of aged paper, my eyes caught a peculiar title. Gnostic Truths. The Hidden God. Intrigued, I skimmed through the pages. The book spoke of ancient Gnostic beliefs, of a malevolent deity named the Demiurge, who masqueraded as a benevolent god. This was unlike anything I had ever read or been taught. That evening, as I sat in my room, the book opened on my lap, a strange unease settled over me. The Gnostics believed that the Demiurge sought to keep humanity ignorant of their true divine nature and potential. The more I read, the more I felt a disconcerting resonance with the text. The unquestioning devotion of the townsfolk, the almost fervent adherence to religious rituals. Could there be a hidden truth, a sinister deception woven into the fabric of our beliefs? I decided to share my findings with Sarah, my childhood friend. She was deeply religious, her faith unwavering, yet she had always respected my quest for understanding. I remember her skeptical raise of an eyebrow when I first mentioned the Demiurge. "Aaron, you don't actually believe this, do you?" she asked, her voice tinged with a mix of concern and curiosity. "It's not about belief, Sarah," I replied. "It's about understanding what lies beneath what we're told to believe." Little did I know, this conversation would be the first step into a journey that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my town, my faith, and the very nature of reality itself. As autumn waned into a bleak winter, my fascination with the Gnostic texts deepened. The notion of the Demiurge, an entity orchestrating a grand deception, consumed my thoughts. I could no longer look at the church, the town, or its people the same way. There was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a whisper that perhaps we were all pawns in a celestial game of control. Sarah, initially skeptical, began to share in my curiosity. Together, we pored over ancient texts and debated late into the night. The more we delved, the more the world around us seemed to warp. People's behavior started to feel orchestrated, as if each prayer and each sermon was a thread in a larger, unseen tapestry. One evening, Sarah arrived at my house, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. She had found a hidden chapter in one of the Gnostic manuscripts we'd been studying. It was a cryptic text, speaking of a ritual that the Demiurge's followers performed to maintain its grip on the world. As we tried to decipher the text, we couldn't help but draw parallels to some of the town's strange traditions, rituals we had grown up with and never questioned. The annual festival of lights, the oddly timed town curfew, the peculiar chants that drifted from the church late at night, it all started to form a sinister pattern. The deeper we dug, the more unsettling things became. Our once peaceful town now felt like a facade, with each smiling face hiding a darker truth. We started noticing symbols and signs that had always been there, yet we had never truly seen symbols that matched those associated with the Demiurge in the Gnostic texts. It was during one of our late-night research sessions that we stumbled upon a revelation that chilled us to our bones. The town's founding members, it seemed, were not just devout Christians, but were part of a sect that believed in the supremacy of the Demiurge. Could it be that our town was founded on these hidden beliefs? We needed to know more. Our research turned into an investigation. We started following the town's elders, hoping to catch them in some act that would confirm our suspicions. What we found was more horrifying than we could have imagined. It wasn't just the elders, it seemed like everyone in town was involved in something beyond normal understanding. One night, we trailed the town's priest to a secluded part of the woods. Hidden among the trees, we watched in horror as a group of townsfolk, including people we had known all our lives, gathered in a clearing. They began a chant, eerie and dissonant, that resonated with a frequency that seemed to claw at the very fabric of reality. As they chanted, the air grew thick, and a palpable sense of dread settled over the woods. We realized then that we were not just uncovering hidden truths, we were peering into an abyss that threatened to swallow us whole. The nights grew longer, and so did our list of unexplainable occurrences. Sarah and I spent every waking moment trying to piece together the puzzle, our lives consumed by the hidden darkness of our town. It started with minor oddities, shadows that seemed to linger longer than they should, cold spots in rooms that were otherwise warm, and an unshakable feeling of being watched. The townspeople, once familiar and friendly, now seemed distant and guarded. Their eyes held a glint of something unrecognizable, as if they were privy to a secret that Sarah and I were desperately trying to uncover. One particularly chilling discovery was a series of old photographs in the town hall archives. They showed the founding members of the town in front of the church, their faces expressionless, their eyes hollow. In each photo, a symbol was present, the same we had seen associated with the Demiurge. It was as though the very foundation of our town was tainted by this malevolent force. Our research revealed more about the Demiurge, a being that thrived on ignorance and fear, keeping its subjects in a state of blind obedience. It was said to manifest physically only when its control was absolute. Sarah and I feared that our town was becoming such a place. The more we learned, the more we felt a sense of urgency. We had to expose the truth, to break the town free from the Demiurge's grasp. But the task seemed monumental, almost impossible. It was then that we learned about a secret group within the town. Whispers of their existence had always been there, but now we saw them in a new light. They were not just a social elite, they were the keepers of the town's dark secret. We started to see patterns in their behavior, meetings held in secret locations, and strange deliveries made to the church. We needed to infiltrate one of these meetings, to find undeniable proof of what was happening. Our opportunity came one called Moonless Night. We followed a group of the town's elite to an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Concealed in the shadows, we watched as they filed inside, their faces grim and purposeful. Creeping closer, we found a vantage point where we could see and hear what was happening inside. The room was lit by candles, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The group began a ritual, speaking in a language that was ancient and unrecognizable. At the center of the room was a symbol, a geometric pattern that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. As the ritual progressed, the air grew heavier, and a sense of dread filled the room. The symbol on the floor started to glow, a sickly light that seemed to seep into the very air we breathed. It was then that we heard it, a sound that was not of this world, a deep resonant hum that vibrated through our bodies. Sarah and I exchanged a look of horror. We had found our proof, but at what cost? We were witnessing a ritual that we feared could bring the demiurge into our world. We had to stop it, but how? We were powerless against the forces at play. It was then that the unthinkable happened. The symbol on the floor erupted in a blinding light, and a figure began to emerge from within it. It was a manifestation of the demiurge, a being of pure malevolence that defied description. Its presence filled the room with a suffocating darkness, and we knew that we had to flee before we were consumed by it. We ran from the farmhouse, the sounds of the ritual echoing in our ears. The night air felt thick and oppressive, as if the very essence of the demiurge was seeping into the world around us. We had seen the face of true evil, and our town was its sanctuary. The days following our harrowing encounter at the farmhouse were a blur of fear and desperation. The town, once a place of comfort and familiarity, now felt like a trap, closing in around us with each passing moment. The manifestation of the demiurge we had witnessed was not just a sign of the town's corruption, but a harbinger of a darker reality seeping into our world. Sarah and I knew we couldn't just leave. We had to find a way to counteract the influence of the demiurge. Our research became more frantic, delving deeper into the Gnostic texts, searching for any clue on how to weaken its hold on the town. As we dug deeper, we discovered a forgotten ritual, one that claimed to be able to seal away the influence of the demiurge. The ritual required an object of pure faith, something untainted by the demiurge's deception. We realized that the old church, the centerpiece of the town's faith, might hold such an object. Our plan was to infiltrate the church under the cover of night, find the object, and perform the ritual. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. The night we chose was still and silent, the stars hidden behind a veil of clouds. We made our way to the church, our hearts pounding in our chests. The church was dark, its usual welcoming glow extinguished. We slipped inside, our flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was heavy, charged with an unseen energy. We made our way to the altar, where we found a small, unassuming wooden cross. It felt warm to the touch, a stark contrast to the cold stone of the church. This had to be it, the object of pure faith. We began the ritual, reciting the ancient incantations, our voices echoing in the hollow church. As we spoke the words, a wind began to swirl around us, the air growing colder with each passing second. The cross in our hands began to glow, a soft light that grew brighter and brighter. Then, everything changed. A deafening roar filled the church, and the ground shook beneath our feet. From the shadows, a figure emerged, the demiurge, its form more terrifying than before. It was a twisted, malevolent entity, its eyes burning with hatred. The ritual was working, but it was also drawing the demiurge to us. We continued the incantations, our voices barely audible over the roar of the creature. The demiurge advanced, its form shifting and changing, a nightmare made flesh. In a moment of terror, I looked at Sarah, her face set in determination. But then, in a flash of light and a scream that tore through the night, she was gone, pulled into the swirling darkness by the demiurge. The creature turned its gaze to me, its eyes a void that threatened to swallow me whole. I felt its hatred, its desire to destroy everything we had tried to accomplish. But in that moment, a surge of strength welled up within me, fueled by the loss of Sarah and the need to finish what we had started. With the final cry, I completed the ritual, the words resonating with a power that I could not understand. The cross erupted in a blinding light, enveloping the demiurge. The creature let out an otherworldly scream as it was pulled back into the darkness from which it had come. The church fell silent, the only sound my ragged breathing. The demiurge was gone, but so was Sarah. I was alone, surrounded by the remnants of the ritual and the echoes of a battle between forces beyond comprehension. The town would never know what happened that night, but I knew that the fight was far from over. The demiurge had been sealed away, but it was still out there, waiting. And I had to find Sarah, wherever she might be. In the aftermath of the ritual, our town seemed to awaken from a long slumber. The oppressive air lifted, and the townspeople appeared to be free from the unseen influence that had held them captive. However, the town I once knew felt irrevocably changed. The streets were quieter, the smiles of passers-by more tentative, as if everyone sensed that something fundamental had shifted. I was haunted by Sarah's disappearance. Her absence was a constant ache, a reminder of the cost of our meddling with forces we barely understood. I couldn't shake the image of her being consumed by the darkness, her final scream echoing in my ears. Determined to find her, I delved deeper into the Gnostic texts and other arcane materials, searching for any clue that could lead me to her. I was driven by a singular purpose to rescue Sarah from whatever fate had befallen her. My search led me to ancient rituals and theories of other dimensions, realms beyond our understanding. The text spoke of gateways and crossings, of ways to traverse these unseen worlds. I realized that if Sarah had been taken by the demiurge, she might be trapped in one of these realms. I prepared for a journey unlike any other, gathering materials and knowledge that I hoped would allow me to navigate these unknown planes. Each night, I experimented with minor rituals, testing the boundaries of reality, feeling it bend and warp under the power of the incantations. But as I delved further into this esoteric world, strange occurrences began to manifest. Objects in my house moved on their own, shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, and whispers filled the night air, just beyond the edge of hearing. It was as if my actions were drawing the attention of things best left undisturbed. Despite the growing dread, I pressed on, driven by the memory of Sarah and the need to bring her back. Finally, I believed I was ready. I set up in the ruins of the old farmhouse where we had first encountered the demiurge. The place felt tainted, but it was a connection to the entity and, I hoped, to Sarah. I began the ritual under the light of a new moon, the darkness around me almost suffocating. I recited the incantations, each word resonating with power. The air shimmered, reality bending and twisting. Then, with the final word, the world went silent. Before me, a rift opened, a tear in the very fabric of existence. It was a gateway, dark and foreboding, an entrance to the unknown. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through, into the abyss, leaving the world I knew behind. The journey was indescribable, a passage through realms of shadow and light, of realities twisted and turned inside out. Time lost meaning, and I was adrift in a sea of the impossible. Finally, I emerged into a realm that was both beautiful and terrifying. It was a world of twilight, of ethereal landscapes that defied physics and reason. And there, in the distance, I saw her Sarah, standing on the edge of an abyss, looking out into the void. The joy of seeing her again was tempered by the realization of where we were on the threshold of the demiurge's domain. The battle to bring Sarah back was just beginning. The realm I had entered was a tapestry of nightmares and wonders, a place where the laws of nature held no sway. Sarah stood at the edge of a chasm that pulsed with a dark energy, her gaze fixed on the swirling abyss below. As I approached, she turned, and in her eyes, I saw a mixture of fear and relief. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You came for me." I reached out to her, and our hands clasped, a tangible connection in this intangible world. "I had to find you," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. We knew we had little time. The demiurge's presence loomed over this realm, a shadow that threatened to engulf everything. We had to find our way back, to escape this place before we were trapped here forever. Guided by the fragments of knowledge I had gathered, we navigated the twisted landscape, dodging shifting terrains and avoiding the gaze of the strange beings that inhabited this realm. The world around us was a reflection of the demiurge's mind, a labyrinth of deception and madness. As we moved, the reality seemed to warp around us, the demiurge's influence trying to disorient and ensnare us. We clung to each other, an anchor in this storm of unreality. The bond we shared, forged in our fight against the darkness, was our only beacon of hope. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we found a rift, a tear in the fabric of this realm, leading back to our world. It shimmered with the same energy as the gateway I had opened, but it was unstable, flickering like a dying flame. We rushed towards the rift, the sounds of the demiurge's minions close behind us. As we reached the edge of the rift, a sense of dread washed over us. We were on the threshold, but something was wrong. The rift was closing, the energy dissipating. In a desperate bid, I channeled every ounce of my will, reciting incantations to stabilize the rift. Sarah joined in, her voice blending with mine, a symphony of defiance against the dark forces that sought to keep us. With a final surge of energy, the rift stabilized, a doorway back to our world. We leaped through, the sounds of the otherworldly realm fading into silence. We emerged back into the ruins of the old farmhouse, the night sky above us calm and serene. We were back, but the world we returned to felt different, tainted by the knowledge of what lay beyond. In the days that followed, Sarah and I shared our story with no one. We knew they would not understand, could not comprehend the truth of what we had experienced. Our town had returned to normal, but the scars of our journey ran deep. We were changed, haunted by the memories of the other realm, and the ever-present threat of the demiurge. But we had each other, and in that, we found solace. The battle was over, but the war against the darkness was far from finished. And so, our vigil continued, a silent guard against the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows of our world. The demiurge was still out there, somewhere, waiting. But we were ready, armed with knowledge and united in our purpose. The story of our town, of Sarah and me, might seem like a mere whisper in the vastness of the universe. But in that whisper lies a truth that in the fight against darkness, the light of hope and courage can never be extinguished. I've always found comfort in the bizarre and the surreal. As a graphic designer by day and a dream enthusiast by night, my world was a kaleidoscope of vivid imaginations and distorted realities. My small apartment in the city was my sanctuary, a place where I could delve into my art, creating and exploring worlds untethered by the constraints of normalcy. But things changed when my dreams started to bleed into reality. It began subtly at first. I would wake up feeling the remnants of my nocturnal travels lingering on my skin, a sensation so real it was unnerving. The landscapes I explored in my sleep were like nothing I had ever seen: ethereal forests with whispering trees, cities with twisted architecture defying the laws of physics, and endless voids where the concept of time seemed to dissolve. Then one morning, everything took a turn for the unimaginable. I woke up to the damp, earthy smell of a forest floor, the early morning mist clinging to my skin. Confusion and panic set in as I realized this was not a dream. The trees towering above me were real, the distant sound of a brook was real. I was miles away from my bed, from my apartment, from everything familiar. I managed to find my way back to the city, my mind racing with questions and fears. How did I get there? Was I sleepwalking? I had heard of people doing strange things in their sleep, but nothing like this. I tried to brush it off as a bizarre anomaly, a one-time occurrence. But the seed of fear was already planted in my mind, growing roots that would soon entangle my entire existence. That night, as I lay in bed, the dread of falling asleep was palpable. My heart raced with the thought of where I might wake up next. The last thing I remember before sleep took over was a feeling of falling, a descent into another surreal dreamscape that awaited me. This time, it was an abandoned city. The buildings loomed over me, their structures warped and twisted in impossible angles. The streets were empty, the silence deafening. It was a hauntingly beautiful nightmare, a place both alien and mesmerizing. And when I woke up, it was to the sight of a dilapidated town, eerily similar to the one I had just dreamt of, the sun casting long, ominous shadows over the broken streets. I was miles away from my bed again, in a reality that was becoming increasingly hard to distinguish from my dreams. The surreal had invaded the real, and I was caught in its grasp, unable to wake up from a nightmare that was no longer just in my mind. As I stood amidst the desolation of the abandoned town, the initial shock gave way to a deep, unsettling fear. This wasn't just a fluke, something inexplicable was happening to me. I found my way back to my apartment, but the security I once felt there had evaporated. My sanctuary now felt like a cell, a place where every night could be a doorway to an unknown and unwanted adventure. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was experiencing some sort of lucid dreaming, a side effect of my fixation with the surreal. Or perhaps it was a sleep disorder I hadn't known I had. I spent hours scouring the internet for answers, diving into forums about sleep paralysis, astral projection, and other phenomena, but nothing seemed to fit my experience. The following night, filled with a sense of dread, I confided in my friend Sarah over the phone. She listened, her voice a mixture of concern and disbelief. "Why don't you set up cameras?" she suggested. "You know, to see what happens when you sleep." It was a logical suggestion. That night, I set up my phone to record, hoping to catch some evidence of sleepwalking. But what I found the next morning chilled me to the bone. The footage showed me lying in bed, then, inexplicably, I just vanished. One frame I was there, the next, I wasn't. Minutes later, I reappeared just as suddenly as I had vanished. There was no sleepwalking, no physical movement from my bed. It was as if I had been erased from my room and then penciled back in. I showed the footage to Sarah, who watched in stunned silence. "Ben, you need to see a doctor or something. This isn't normal," she said, her voice tinged with worry. But I couldn't. I was drawn into the mystery, an obsession growing within me. I needed to understand, to find out why this was happening. I started keeping a dream journal, documenting every detail of these surreal landscapes. And that's when I noticed something even more unsettling in each dream. Among the chaos and the bizarre, there were messages. Cryptic, fragmented sentences scrawled on walls, whispered by faceless voices, always alluding to something deeper, something hidden in the maze of my dreams. The messages varied, but they all pointed towards a truth that I was both eager and terrified to uncover. "Find the mirror," one said. Another whispered, "In the labyrinth of the self, lies the truth." The words haunted me, echoing in my mind during my waking hours. What labyrinth? What truth? Each night, I fell asleep with a mix of fear and anticipation, not knowing where I would wake up, but desperate for answers. The line between my waking life and my dream world was blurring, and I was too deep into unraveling this mystery to notice the toll it was taking on me. The deeper I delved into this enigma, the more my days and nights intertwined, creating a tapestry of confusion and dread. I began to dread the night, yet I was irresistibly drawn to the secrets it held. My waking hours were spent in a haze, my thoughts constantly drifting back to the cryptic messages and surreal landscapes of my dreams. As my obsession grew, my life outside these dreams began to unravel. My work suffered, I missed deadlines, and my designs lost their earlier vibrancy. Friends, including Sarah, expressed concern, but I brushed them off. They couldn't possibly understand the urgency of my quest. I meticulously documented each dream, each waking location. The The patterns were elusive, like trying to trace a path in a constantly shifting maze. But one element remained consistent. The messages. They felt like breadcrumbs, leading me towards something monumental. One night, my dream took me to a vast ocean under a starless sky. The water was unnervingly still, like a dark mirror reflecting nothing but the void above. And there, etched into the sand of an isolated beach, was a new message. The heart of the maze awaits. I woke up on that very beach, the cold damp sand clinging to my skin, the eerie stillness of the ocean echoing in my ears. This couldn't be mere coincidence. There was a purpose behind these experiences, a design that I was desperately trying to understand. I was no longer just a passive observer, I was a participant in a game whose rules I did not know. In an attempt to gain some control, I began experimenting. I tried to steer my dreams, to force them towards answers. But the more I tried, the more chaotic they became. The landscapes grew more distorted, the messages more cryptic. Then came the night that changed everything. My dream started as usual, in a familiar sense of confusion and disorientation. But as the dream progressed, I found myself in a vast, sprawling labyrinth. The walls were mirrors, reflecting distorted images of myself, each one more twisted than the last. I wandered the labyrinth, lost and alone. The reflections showed me versions of myself I didn't recognize, versions filled with anger, sorrow, fear. And as I ventured deeper into the maze, the air grew colder, the reflections more menacing. The labyrinth seemed endless, a twisted journey through my own psyche. I heard whispers in the air, echoes of the messages I had found before. Face yourself, they hissed. Find the truth. When I awoke, I was no longer in my bed. I was in a real labyrinth, the cold, reflective walls towering above me. Panic set in as I realized this was no longer just a dream. I was trapped in a realm of my own creation, a maze that mirrored the chaos of my subconscious. The line between dream and reality had not just blurred, it had been erased. Trapped within the tangible walls of the labyrinth, a chilling realization dawned upon me: this maze was more than a dreamscape. It was a manifestation of my deepest fears and unacknowledged truths. Each turn I took led me deeper into the enigma, the cold, unyielding mirrors reflecting back my growing despair. As I wandered, the labyrinth seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The walls shifted subtly, disorienting me further. Echoes of my own breath and the soft taps of my footsteps were my only companions in the suffocating silence. The deeper I ventured, the more surreal the reflections became, morphing into nightmarish versions of my reality. I stumbled upon scenes that unnerved me to my core. In one mirror, I saw myself, older, worn down by a life of solitude and regret. In another, my reflection was distorted, my face twisted in an expression of horror. The eyes that stared back at me were filled with an unspoken accusation, a reminder of the life I was neglecting in pursuit of this obsession. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to be both mine and not mine. They spoke of truths I had denied, fears I had suppressed. You cannot hide here forever, they taunted. The truth lies within. Finally, I reached the heart of the labyrinth. It was a circular chamber, the walls entirely made of mirrors. In the center stood a large, imposing mirror, different from the rest. It pulled me towards it, an inexplicable force compelling me to face whatever lay within. With a trembling hand, I reached out and touched the mirror's surface. It rippled like liquid under my fingers, and I was suddenly engulfed in a blinding light. As my eyes adjusted, I saw my reflection, or what should have been my reflection. Instead, it was a more honest version of myself, one that bore the weight of my hidden fears, insecurities, and desires. The reflection spoke, its voice echoing around the chamber. You have wandered far from reality, Ben, it said. In this labyrinth, you have faced the parts of yourself you've tried to escape. Your obsession with the surreal has become your reality, blurring the lines between waking and dreaming. I listened, a sense of dread mixed with clarity washing over me. The reflection continued: to leave this maze, you must accept these truths. Your fascination with otherworldly landscapes was an escape, a way to avoid the complexities of your own psyche and the reality you live in. The truth hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I had been running away, losing myself in dreams to avoid facing my life's challenges and my own shortcomings. This labyrinth, this entire ordeal, was a manifestation of my inner turmoil, a physical embodiment of my struggle to confront myself. To find your way back, the reflection concluded, you must embrace all parts of yourself, the good and the bad. Only then can the maze be unraveled. As the words sank in, the chamber began to dissolve around me, the walls melting away into nothingness. I closed my eyes, a sense of acceptance and resolve building within me. When I opened them again, I was back in my bed, the morning light filtering through my curtains. The labyrinth was gone, but its lessons remained. Lying in my bed, the remnants of the labyrinth still echoing in my mind, I felt a profound sense of change within me. The experience in the maze had been terrifying, yet enlightening. I realized that my obsession with surreal landscapes and escapism through my dreams had been a way to avoid confronting my deeper issues and insecurities. The days that followed were a period of introspection and gradual transformation. I started reaching out to friends and family, reconnecting with the world I had been ignoring. Conversations with Sarah, once filled with concern, became more about sharing and understanding. I explained my experiences and revelations, and she listened, offering support and a grounding perspective. Professionally, I found a renewed sense of purpose in my work. My designs became more authentic, reflecting both the imaginative flair I loved and a new depth that resonated with my clients. The balance I had lost in my life was slowly returning, as I learned to appreciate reality as much as my dream worlds. Yet, the most significant change was within myself. I started to acknowledge and accept my fears, my desires, and the parts of myself I had hidden away. I sought professional help, speaking openly with a therapist about my experiences. It was a relief to discuss my dreams, the labyrinth, and their symbolic meanings without fear of judgment. I understood that the cryptic messages and the maze itself were reflections of my subconscious mind trying to communicate with me. Find the mirror, in the labyrinth of the self, lies the truth. These messages were urging me to confront and embrace all aspects of my being. As I made these changes, the surreal landscapes of my dreams began to shift. They became less ominous, more reflective of my inner growth and balance. The fear that had once gripped me at the prospect of sleep faded, replaced by a curious anticipation of what my subconscious would reveal next. In this journey of self-discovery, I found that the real and the surreal could coexist within me harmoniously. The labyrinth had been a harsh, yet necessary teacher. It showed me that the most complex and challenging maze was not in my dreams, but within myself. As the weeks turned into months, the surreal episodes that once dominated my life became distant memories, like echoes of a strange, otherworldly journey. I no longer woke up in unknown landscapes, but in my own bed, each morning bringing a sense of normalcy and peace that I had long missed. My life had found a new rhythm, a balance between the real and the imagined. The dreams continued, but they were no longer escapades into bizarre realms. Instead, they were reflections of my inner world, sometimes vivid and whimsical, other times introspective and serene. I realized that my journey through the labyrinth had been a turning point. It forced me to confront the parts of myself I had been avoiding, and to recognize the value of the life I had outside my dreams. My relationships flourished, my career took on new heights, and I found joy in the small, everyday moments. Looking back, I understood that the labyrinth was never a punishment or a curse. It was a manifestation of my own psyche, a challenge to face my— In the evenings, I would sometimes sit by my window, looking out at the city lights, reflecting on my journey. The fear and confusion that once clouded my thoughts had dissipated, leaving a clear, starlit path of self-awareness and growth. One day, as I worked on a new graphic design project, I found myself drawing a labyrinth. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a place of fear and confusion, but a symbol of discovery and self-acceptance. I infused the design with colors and patterns that represented my journey, a journey through the maze of my mind. The story of my surreal escapades became a part of me, a chapter in my life that I look back on not with fear, but with gratitude. It was a reminder of the strength that lies in facing our innermost selves, in embracing the complexities of our minds. As I put the finishing touches on the design, a sense of accomplishment filled me. The labyrinth on the canvas was a testament to my journey, a maze I had navigated and emerged from, stronger and more grounded. I stepped back, admiring the artwork. It was a beautiful fusion of the surreal and the real, a representation of the balance I had found. And in that moment, I knew that while the labyrinth of my dreams had faded away, the lessons it taught me would forever be a part of who I am. The story ends with me, Ben, looking at the canvas, a subtle smile on my face. The labyrinth may have been a construct of my dreams, but its impact was deeply rooted in reality. And as I turned off the lights, ready to embrace another night's sleep, I felt a comforting thought: the maze was behind me, but the journey of self-discovery was ongoing, an adventure that continued each day, in both dreams and wakefulness.